In the Wurail Kingdom, a young guy in a crisp modern business suit just freezes in a massive throne room, staring like he's lost, while the word hero keeps pounding in his head, and he can't shake the feeling he doesn't belong anywhere near that title. The stern-faced king demands absolute silence, veiled in authority, and booms that you're right, you're the hero from another world. He demands to know what it means as a hooded mage drops to one knee in front of him, and the moment the mage raises that crystal-topped staff, it suddenly bursts into glow, lighting up the truth and leaving the man reeling. He blurts out, wondering if he's got any special talent, and the king cuts in. They never found a true hero's skill, but he does have 3 built-in powers: hero's growth, omnilingualism, and the ability to adapt to any environment. Revelation detonates panic across the other mages, who can't believe the summoning that once worked now went wrong. One of them rushes to the king to say the result can't be reversed, and when the king demands what to do, the mage answers with a horror that ends in a single order: behead him. The young man gets struck like he's hit by a battering ram, then the mage's voice booms, and as he's ordered to be beheaded, his face contorts in pure terror, the useless hero condemned and sentenced. The second the answer lands, the king snaps his arms wide, rage cracking through him. He bellows that it's been 15 years since the last summoning, and another 15 will have to pass before they can try again. He keeps roaring with fury, demanding to know why they dragged such a useless fool into this, and when a mage tries to soothe him, the king's face hardens into sheer despair, because he's convinced they can't survive on their own, and he can't stop replaying the ritual in his head, wondering where it all went wrong. He roars at the hooded figures to stop, snarling that they shouldn't come at him with that useless bloodline, while the mages freeze, reeling at the sheer heat of his rage. Hearing the king's decree, the summoned man blurts, "Wait," and begs to do anything at all, yet the king's eyes stay icy, cutting him down as he snaps that a worthless man can do nothing. Just as the king turns his back, a minister strides in and bows deep, then the monarch snaps, "What's on your mind?" And the minister answers with a charged grin. He's got a proposal tied to the summoned man. It hints that in some backward spot like a lumber mill, the hero, missing, wouldn't raise a single eyebrow, and then a cold, cruel grin bursts across his face as he starts talking. So they cooked up the biggest deception, spreading a lie that the hero's summon worked. He'd be locked away to train, popping out only for ceremonies, while a Dika hero quietly took the stage in the shadows, and with the real summoner shoved aside, 15 brutal years slipped by. Now he's dropped into a roaring forge. Just then one smith says the next hero's summoning is creeping closer, while another bluntly warns that their time together won't last much longer. He flashes a warm grin and rubs the back of his head, thinking how after 15 years of their guidance, he's finally able to build so many things. Back then, when he first arrived, he couldn't even forge a simple name. The master blacksmith snaps at him, preaching that his skills are earned, not handed over, and that it's a crime to waste that talent on endless repairs instead of forging something worthy. The summoned man stares at his hammer, and with a heavy sigh, he just accepts it. This fate is what life is giving him. He stared at his rough, calloused hands and counted 15 grueling years inside the royal forge, because to the kingdom, he was just a lifeless ornament, a secret locked away. His job was nasty, brutal, and straight-up dangerous, but it hit different, way more satisfying than the boring desk life he ditched back in Japan, because here, he only had to work during the day. 15 years ago, nobody wanted him, but he kept grinding, turning even one lonely nail into proof that if he stayed faithful to his craft, he could carve out a life of his own. He turned to the other blacksmiths he'd worked shoulder to shoulder with for years, and poured out heartfelt thanks. Ever since they yanked him into this world, he kept replaying his journey, slogging through hardships, sure, but forging friendships that surprised him, and somehow his life felt whole. Meanwhile, inside the royal castle, the long-awaited day finally crashed into existence. After 15 years, the hero's summoning ritual was about to begin, and the countdown had started with. Inside the throne room, King and Three stood frozen in awe as a blinding light tore open the summoning circle, and the whole court erupted into cheers, because the summoning worked. The light dimmed and there they were, 3 totally stunned people. A knight in blazing armor strode up and greeted them, welcoming them to the kingdom of Wurail, then introduced himself as Haiji, the last hero. Right then, one newcomer, a sharp woman in a business suit, cut in and said her name was Indu Kanai, and the whole crowd erupted with buzz, already certain that a hero and a magic user had been summoned. She trembles with nerves and insists they have to get ready for the ceremony, because once they present the hero to the public, the king promises this is the moment the country finally breathes and settles into peace. Then the king shifts his gaze to the former hero and hands him a fiefdom like a prize, and the minister paints it as a peaceful, beautiful land where he can finally rest and nurse the scars from his 15 years of service. Yet the hero stays silent, because the truth is, he never once stepped onto a battlefield. He drops to his knees before the throne, lowers his head in reverence, and gratefully takes the king's offer. He's officially taken his new post, and right outside the castle walls, a carriage is already waiting for him. He spins back to the crew from the forge, thanking them for everything. Then they wave him off with big smiles, urging him to come by anytime. When the carriage jolts ahead, he finally settles in, ready to ride, and can't help thinking, 40 years old now, and he's staring into the unknown, wondering what kind of wild new lands are waiting for him. That moment crushes him, tears burst free and streak down his face, and all he can think is how pathetic he looks, like he just wants one quiet place to hide. His carriage rumbled onward through the countryside, and as he looked out at the passing fields, he couldn't help thinking, those 15 years at the palace kept him busy, but they never felt like the life of a true hero. Still, he's convinced the new guy they just called in, Joji Sagami, will give the kingdom the power it's been missing. He rode out of the royal capital for 20 grueling days, then finally rolled into his new home, only for the driver to point at a nearby hill and say he could see the whole domain from the top. The former hero shot him a grateful smile, sore to the bone from the journey, and climbed out of the carriage. He stood on the hilltop, wind battering his clothes as he stared across the land, and shock hit his face the moment he saw it. "So this is it," he whispered, while the driver just watched in silence. Before him, an endless sea of trees stretched into infinity, and he blurted out, "Is this really all mine now?" The truth finally hit. Disbelief crashed over him like a tidal wave, and he couldn't stop asking if this was truly his new home. He couldn't even tell if this wasteland had a single village or a single soul, so he had no choice but to push into the woods and check for himself. The deeper he went, the clearer it became. A tiny, battered hut was waiting there. He tiptoed into the tiny building, and the air practically reeked of dust and neglect, like it had been abandoned for ages. Yet with a little scrubbing, that plain bed frame could be made usable again. He scanned the main room, then spotted a tiny structure through the doorway, and couldn't help wondering if it was a shed, because this simple setup looked like it was all his new home had. His eyes locked onto a solid stone hearth inside the hut, and it hit him like a lightning bolt. This wasn't some random thing, it was royal provision from a king. Maybe the king wasn't as bad as he judged. Trapped in a strange, overgrown ruin, the armored hero scans his surroundings and decides what to do next. First of all, he has to find water, but the place offers nothing. No rivers, no wells, not even a single trace. After savoring his newly found power, he thrusts out a gauntlet hand and casts a spell. Then a glowing sphere of pure water erupts into the air above his palm, sparkling with raw magic. Water erupts into the wooden bucket until it's packed to the brim, and relief hits him hard. He can't believe even beginner-level magic is this useful. Now that his thirst is gone, the real question slams in. Where's he going to find food? He starts carving a stick into a rough spear, then slams into the ugly truth. There's nothing edible anywhere close by, and stepping into that thick forest feels terrifying, because building the tools he'd need for a real hunt would take way too long. He figures that if a river's nearby, he can at least try to catch fish. Then, while he's stuck in his thoughts, his eyes snap to something lurking just past the ruins. A sudden gust tears through the area, whipping a few stray leaves across his field of vision. His gaze snaps to the motion, and then he spots something he never saw coming. A huge, open field soaked in breathtaking white flowers. His eyes snap to a huge, shining thing sitting dead center in the clearing, so perfect it freaks him out. Because how does something like that even exist in the middle of a forest? And is it really a giant gold ingot just waiting there? He closed in on the massive golden fortress, staring at how insanely huge it looked up close. Then he swung his gauntlet and knocked, and the moment it hit, he froze, stunned, because it didn't feel anything like. Suddenly, the whole ground started trembling, and a towering golden mass lurched forward with a savage, gut-deep rumble. A massive, leathery wing tore open with a thunderous snap, and he yelped in panic at the sudden chaos. The creature tore away its disguise and unveiled its full form, an absolutely majestic white-scaled dragon. It lowered its head, that massive eye locking onto the fallen man. Then he stared right back, mind spinning, asking if this thing was truly a dragon and what in the world a creature like that was doing here. The creature's voice boomed across the clearing, and it declared, "This is the Forest of Dalida, a sacred home where gods and spirits linger." Then it proclaimed itself the guardian of this land. It crowned itself the cruel, holy dragon, then barked a cold command at the human, "Leave right now," because this wasn't a place for him. Reeling from that order, he just stood there and stared as the huge dragon dropped onto the bed of flowers, its massive body swallowing the whole scene. He closes in on the great beast, shouting its name and snapping, "What's wrong with you?" The dragon squirms with a low grumble, saying its scales are just too thick, so it can't scratch that terrible itch with its own claws. As he steps closer, he demands to know if a dragon's scales can even feel pain, and Cruel snaps back that those scales are built like armor, so they're numb to pain and itchiness alike. A look of understanding and grit hits his face, and he orders Kroll to hold on. Then he declares he's about to craft the tools he needs. As the dragon finally drops its weight, the hero's promise to forge tools lingers like a thunderclap in the air. He slaps together a makeshift forge in the clearing, furnace blazing, anvil set, and a quenching trough ready to go. Then he nods like, "Yep, we're ready." He kicks off his work, checks the furnace, and grins. It's finally hot enough now. And with this setup locked in, he knows he'll forge exactly what he needs without a single hitch. Now dressed in a blacksmith's apron over his tunic, he hoists the hammer high. He's finished every prep he promised himself. He clenches his focus and slams the hammer onto the glowing metal. Wham! Sparks explode outward as the shaping kicks off, and a sharp clang of steel slices through the forest air. He hammered at the forge without stopping. Clang, sparks, and heat roaring as his hammer rhythmically drove the metal into shape. Then he gripped the blazing piece with tongs and carved it perfectly with fierce, precise strikes. The brutal heat poured down on him, sweat beaded on his brow, and he wiped it off in a flash, then jumped right back into the job, eyes locked and unshakable. With the shaping done, he slammed the scorching metal into a water trough, then let his shocked triumph erupt into the air as the piece snapped cool in an instant. He let out a shaky breath, bracing himself for the grind waiting ahead, and figured he still needed 8 or 10 more items. All right, one down. He steeled his nerves and locked in, ready to move. While he was busy toiling, the boss he served finally shifted, something massive and reptilian. Then I slowly cracked it open and a cruel voice snapped, "Wake up, cruel." Now the great dragon was fully awake, staring down at its own body like, what the hell is this? Those huge metal staples pinning its scales together weren't building stuff, and they definitely weren't any medical tool it had ever seen. The gaze lunged in, then it toppled onto the human standing there. "Human, so you came back," the dragon growled. "Good, you're awake," the hero shot back, flooded with relief. The dragon tasted the new sensations and finally understood. The awful itch was gone and there was no pain. Then the hero hauled out a huge wooden tub packed with a ready-to-eat meal and told the dragon, "Eat up and boost your blood." He pointed out that spinach helps build blood and hits you with a hefty dose of iron, and the dragon looked genuinely impressed that a human could even manage something like iron. "It's a small price," the hero insisted, urging, "Please, eat even a little." He watches as the holy dragon devours the massive meal, then asks, "So, how's it taste?" From the barely empty basin, a clear, happy thought spills out, pure satisfaction. "It's delicious." The man exhales in relief and smiles. He bursts into laughter, pats the dragon like, "Go on, eat your fill," then orders it to rest. If that's what it loves, he'll cook up anything it wants, and the mighty beast, standing there in awe, soaks in the whole scene like a silent promise of pure human kindness. That night, for the very first time, the man finally slept in peace, lying right beside the colossal dragon as they both gazed up at a sky of stars, sheltered beneath the canopy above. Next morning, he jolts awake in a sea of white flowers. Panic hits him because he realizes he totally slept through the night. Then he looks up and spots a shadowy figure looming over him. A horned young woman leans in and asks, "Are you awake?" And he snaps up, stunned, demanding who she is and how she dares to call him human. Her exact wording hits him, and fear creeps in as he realizes she might have been watching him all night, because only the soldiers ever used that name, Haiji. She just confirms his name, Yuji, and you're thrown in as if it's your destiny, leaving him staring up at her, still utterly stunned. She heaps praise on him, calling him incredible for bandaging a wound with iron, then smirks and admits, "I'm cruel." And the moment her name lands, it hits him like lightning. He freezes in stunned silence, and she cuts through the quiet by asking if he's embarrassed, then whips her top up to reveal a long, stitched scar running across her abdomen. She says it's almost healed, but the moment he sees it, he panics, turns bright red, and blurts for her to cover herself up. He sank to the water's edge, still trying to process the chaos. Then Cruel beside him let out a breath of relief and swore it was his own strength that kept him standing. Right after, she snapped her gaze to him and said she had something to ask. He whipped his head around, baffled, and mouthed it back like, "A request." His eyes went wide with pure disbelief, and a bead of sweat slid down his temple as he stammered. Then he leaned in, face flushed and earnest, while Cruel blurted out exactly what she wanted. She craved the iron and demanded he take her as his disciple. The sky sprawled wide over the forest of gods and spirits of Doltia, and right beneath it, boom, the hero and the holy dragon, Cruel, collided in a moment that changed everything. In the royal dining hall, dinner is in full swing. One ringed hand plunges into the food on an ornate plate. Shiner, crowned as king, veiled 3 and sat at the head of a long table. As his minister poured him a drink, the king admitted his doubts lingered for a while, but now he's sure the new hero, Kane, is turning out to be surprisingly useful. He scoffed, sneering that the old hero was nothing but decoration, and wondering if the guy was probably stuck somewhere in trouble. The minister flashed a cruel smile and nodded right away, saying that the useless former hero could never stand up to the current one. The minister keeps on gloating, purring that after 15 years away from the palace, that ex-hero, probably being gnawed to death by some demon, until his creepy cackle gets yanked off mid-laugh when the hall doors explode open and a full-armored knight stumbles in, shouting that he needs an audience. A sudden crash rips through the room and startles both the king and his minister. When Haiji the knight stumbles in, the king blurts 3 shocked cries, and Haiji drops to one knee, gasping for breath as he delivers the blow that breaks everything. The Warrior Knight Brigade has been completely wiped out. The king roars for answers, stunned that his unbeatable knights got wiped out, and the minister can't believe it either. Haiji snaps that their weapons crumbled like paper the moment they met their enemy, and the royal court falls into a shocked, breathless silence. In a cozy, vine-wrapped little house, everything feels way calmer, at least for a second. Cruel, still wearing a humanoid body, darts around excitedly, calling it Haiji's home, poking at every object like she's on a mission. Haiji, now dressed in plain civilian clothes, just watches her as she gleefully teases him for talking so casually to a young maiden like herself. She shuts her eyes and flashes that soft smile, bam, leaving stunned Haiji to realize she's 170 years old, and to her, that's still pretty young for a dragon, so the shock hits him hard enough that he can't even speak. With a grim face, she tells Haiji that the demon tribe caused her injuries, and shows a big stitched scar on her side. Then she snaps that they're going after the divine beast Dalada. Haiji, you see that wound? Ask her how she got it. She snaps her eyes away and, cheeks burning, admits she messed up, then swears she never loses to them. He watches in silence and mutters that she's nothing but brutish. Rage snaps across his comment as she shoots back, demanding to know why he's so dead set on making her his disciple when she was just trying to tell him something important. Then everything flips. She lights up and blurts that yes, she does want to be his disciple. He freezes, stunned, asking if she's really serious. And with a radiant smile, she nods and says it would be an honor to be taught by another master of. She tilts her head at him, full of questions, and he stares back down like he's lost in his own head. Then it hits him. Her unbreakable will is exactly the kind of comfort he wants right beside him. After locking in his choice, he lifts his gaze to her radiant smile and nods, agreed. Then he declares they'll open a blacksmith shop together. She erupts in joy, wraps her arms around him in a fierce hug, and sobs his name, pouring out her gratitude. Later, in their brand new workshop, she corners him and asks why he's building weapons, and he just nods, hands on his hips, like he can't believe she even had to ask. He tells her that if he already made weapons at his last job, he might as well craft something basic, like a kitchen knife. And when she leans over a wooden crate to peek inside, she fires back, asking what her job is supposed to be. He whips his head toward her and tells her the real priority, watch and learn. Today, her only job is to stare at him closely and take it all in, and she shoots her hand up with zero hesitation, nodding along like, got it. She stares like she can't blink as Haiji hammers at the forge, utterly locked in. Then with a sharp breath, he lifts his hammer high and goes in, eyes blazing, that draconic gaze catching the metal's scorching glow. He wraps up his work, looking completely worn out, then blurts out an apology to Cruel for getting sidetracked. But she's the last person to be bored, her eyes blazing with excitement. She tells him it was amazing to watch, and then boom, she declares she wants to try making a kitchen knife herself. He tells Kroll the blade isn't a kitchen knife yet, then shows the next step. He dusts it with special powder, heats it up, and dries it until it's set, and Kroll can't help but blurt, so this is the final finish, right? He tells her it's not ready yet, saying the blade they've got right now just won't hold the edge, it lacks the tenacity he needs. Cruel stares at him, baffled, and demands, what do you mean by tenacity? He breaks it down, saying tenacity is the metal's own power to hold its shape, and then he calls it guts to make it click, right when Cruel laughter sneers and snatches up the idea. He keeps teaching, saying that low-temp heating is the key to unlocking the blade's quality. Then, right mid-sentence, he slams the searing metal into a trough of oil, and it erupts in sizzling steam. Cruel snaps, what are you doing? And the teacher just smiles, calmly saying that after this step, the only thing left is to polish it with the final polish locked in. He lifts the finished kitchen knife like he's showing off to the world, grinning as he declares it done. Then he glares at the shining blade in wild awe, shouting that it's beautiful. Her praise electrifies him, and he bursts out with his plan. By the end of the day, he'll forge 5 knives, with Cruel right there beside him. And when she hears it, joy sparks in her eyes as she blurts out, you really mean it, don't you? She slams her fist into the air, shouting with pure excitement, and Hagi nods along, confirming they'll forge a huge batch of knives and haul them to the nearby town to sell. They reach a bustling town square fast, with market stalls lining the streets beneath strings of colorful festoon lights. But the moment they sit there staring at those flawlessly crafted knives, their optimism crumbles, because not a single customer even shows up. AG scans the moving crowd and clocks the pattern. This market is packed with young couples. A nearby merchant backs him up, saying accessories and toys are flying off the shelves, while everyone's straight up ignoring the metal goods. That hits Cruel like a spark. Why sell at the market when they could hawk their swords to mercenaries instead? Haiji pauses, eyes narrowing, and you can practically see his thoughts sprinting toward the idea of forging deadly combat blades. His thoughts get ripped apart by a sudden commotion. One look and Haji sees a young woman get shoved to the cobblestones, her wares flying everywhere. She begs to be released, but a man jerks in and yells at her to shut up. Boom, Haji's attention snaps to him right away. Heidi's eyes lock on as the merchant woman rises to her feet and storms right up to an armored man, pleading for her sword back and insisting it's one of her shop's most valuable items, while Haji stands frozen, cruel beside him, worried out of his mind, practically begging him to step in. The armored man brushes off her pleas and parades the blade like a trophy, yelling that it's a royal sword, light on the arm, built to last, and sharp enough to slice through a demon's hide. Then a young boy from a merchant's stall blurts out that his sister must have shelled out a fortune for a royal weapon this gorgeous. As the arrogant swordsman refused to budge, Cruel's patience snapped, and from the sidelines she couldn't stand watching him. She marched up to Haji and demanded permission to cut him down. Before she could even move, Haji caught her with a calming hand on her head, his face dead serious as he ordered her to wait. He watched the merchant kid lunge for his own property again and again, but the swordsman shoved him back and screamed insults in his face. So Haji snapped to attention, because even if that was a legit royal sword, you don't get to stomp on someone else's weapon like that. He stepped in without hesitation, snapping his kitchen knife up to block the swordsman's crashing downward strike. Steel exploded with a blinding flash. The blast smashed the swordsman's blade to pieces, and he froze, staring in pure shock at the cracked hilt still in his grip. Then he gasped. It broke her. A crowd exploded in amazement, buzzing about what move could possibly crush a royal sword. And as the humiliated swordsman bolted with revenge on his mind, a panicked Hagi scrambled to insist to the watching crowd that it wasn't some magic technique, or even a blade he'd used. He was cut off when the young merchant woman hurried in, hands clasped tight with gratitude, thanking him over and over as she called him Sir Swordsman, and it instantly made him squirm. She held up that plain blade, the one that had just settled the fight, and asked if he was a blacksmith, but Hagi cut her off fast, saying he wasn't a swordsman or a blacksmith at all. He was a cook, and that shocking truth froze her for a moment. The young merchant woman freezes and stares, slapping her hand over her mouth as disbelief hits, then blurts out in shock, "What kind of kitchen knife is this even?" Her shock flips into pure awe when she spots its top-tier quality, an S-rank knife, just stamped kitchen knife, made by Haji, gleaming like it owns the room. He's still just as lost, staring at the blade like it's betraying him. How does his kitchen knife get tagged as S-rank? In Warel, the ranking system is crystal clear. 8 levels, with SS sitting at the top for divine tools and sacred treasures, and his creation lands right one step below that legendary height. Sensing her opening, the merchant woman pounces and asks if he'll sell it. Then she rockets her offer from 16 to 20 gold coins, a price that instantly throws him for a loop. Just as he starts to answer, Cruel bursts in grinning, thrusting 2 more identical knives in his hands, like it's all a game, while the merchant woman's eyes go even wider as she blurts out if those are his too. Hyrule confirms it with a grin, bragging that these are just as insanely awesome S-rank items. Meanwhile, Haji can only stare in the background, remembering he'd only tossed them in by pure luck. With her decision locked in tight, the merchant woman grips a heavy pouch of coins and declares, straight to everyone, she's going to buy all 5 knives. Her offer hits him like a lightning strike. His mind instantly reels through the currency math. 1 gold coin equals 10,000 yen, so 100 gold coins would slam him with a cool $1,000,000 on his very first day in this world. In a bright, sun-soaked town square, the armored hero and his partner, Cruel, settle into a street-side table. Cruel's passed out cold, while a young woman strides up with the unmistakable body language of someone here for a meeting. With a dazzling smile, she introduces herself as Filna Larsa, the traveling merchant, and warmly tells them it's an absolute pleasure to meet them. He clocked her arrival with a tired stare, took a sip from his cup, nodded at her words, then snapped the tone, turning straight to her and calling out, "Filna." His straight-to-the-point confidence leaves her flustered. She even wonders if he can honestly cough up a full 100 gold coins. Then she spots his well-worn, patched-up coat and her doubts harden, so she blurts out an apology. If he's selling something at that price, she just can't afford it. He understood her position and, calm as a storm, said he'd reveal a condition for the deal. Then her eyes widened as she agreed to hear him out. He's dead set and hungry for success. He pushes for an exclusive contract with her, swears he'll never sell his knives to any other merchant, and makes it clear he's determined to pull her into his guild. Proposal detonates inside her. Cold sweat breaks across her brow as the meaning hits. An exclusive contract for an S-rank knife hangs in the air, and the idea that she'd be the only one selling it, that pressure crushes her. She clenches her composure, stares him down, and asks if he's really serious, then cuts him off before he can even speak, saying she's got her own condition for this deal. The hero softly strokes Cruel's head while she sprawls on the table, totally at ease, and he admits he's got a rough time handling people. So with Cruel being the exception, he's not trying to widen his circle of friends any further. Then he snaps his focus back to Fulnell and tells her he needs her to run a few detailed procedures, right now. With that confident smile of hers, she nods instantly, says it's no big deal, and promises to take it all from there. She drops her gaze as he pulls out a tiny hand-drawn map and tells her to hit the marked spot to grab the items, and she nods quietly, ready to go. Her calm yes snaps into pure disbelief the moment he drops the location, and when she demands, wide-eyed, if he really lives in Dalada Forest, it's like the truth hits her like a punch. Her surprise crashes into a bright, friendly wave from Cruel. She even promises to hunt her down if she gets lost. Then Felinor whips her eyes to the horned girl, and her brain scrambles to figure out what kind of beast person she is. Then the girl drops the truth. She's a holy dragon, and Fillmore just freezes, stunned speechless. Still reeling, she whips back to the hero, one hand clamped over her mouth, and blurts out, "Wait, are you the guardian deity of the Dalada Forest?" He can't quite meet her eyes, sweat beads on his face, and admits, it's a complicated story. Their words paint a picture, one lonely cabin, tucked deep inside the ancient woods, surrounded by towering, watchful trees that stand in eerie silence. A huge celebratory feast sprawled out before them, headlined by a freshly baked, pizza-like centerpiece, ringed with heaps of food and drinks. This wasn't just dinner, it was a special blowout. Haiji told an ecstatic Cruel that the extra income finally let them pull off a feast like this, and she practically leaned into the table, eyes blazing with pure excitement at every dish. She took a huge bite and her face lit up like pure bliss. She couldn't stop raving about how delicious it was, and she marveled that Haiji wasn't just a hero, but an absolute cooking beast. Her joy practically burst out of her as she soaked up that warm, steady calm, ready to repay his kindness with action. With a bright smile, she declared she'd go on a hunt for him as thanks. Hagi snapped his head up, stunned, and demanded what she planned to bring back with, then stopped, right there, mid-question. Without a word more, she snatched a bow off the wall, told him she was borrowing it, and then bolted out of the cabin before he could even blink, while he stood there, calling after her, totally lost. Moments later, the forest exploded with a deafening roar, and out of the shadows, a massive dark-scaled dragon crashed into view. Thinking it was his companion, Haiji burst out of the cabin and screamed, "You turn into a dragon." But the chaos wasn't what he expected. Haiji spotted Cruel by a snapped bow, slumped in heartbreak. She told him she'd seen a boar, pulled back with everything she had, and the bow just shattered, so Haiji let out a sigh, wiped away her tears, and warned her she shouldn't burn her full strength on a normal bow. After the boar slipped out of the picture, she kept talking, right then, explaining that Dragon had come for her. As she spoke, they stopped at the black mouth of a cave, the very thing behind that roar. Haiji listened, and then it all clicked in his head, finally making perfect sense. She lays a comforting hand on Cruel's head, telling her to trust him with everything. Then she looks up, eyes wide, brimming with shock and hope. The moment he promises he'll forge a bow she can draw without it snapping, her face lights up, an enormous, unstoppable grin bursting wide like fireworks. Fresh on this new mission, he steps into his rough, rustic workshop and stares down the job ahead, because sure, iron could give him power, but that bow would be a monster of a weight. He rubs his chin, eyes locked in deep thought. If that bow's too heavy, it'll throw off his aim every time, and then it's useless as a hunting weapon. He realizes iron won't cut it, so he drops it instantly and hunts for a whole new material, scanning his surroundings like he's racing the clock for something better. His search slams him into a hidden crate packed with unfamiliar, gleaming ingots, cool silver-like metal he can't place, but he knows it could be the answer. Right then, a brutal commotion outside yanks his attention. He yells for Cruel, and there she is, effortlessly clawing out a massive trench with her bare hands, pausing to ask if he wants her to dig a hole outside. He bursts out, shouting at her to stop, because down at the bottom of the massive pit she carved sits the day's dark dragon. He grills her about why she did it, and then it hits him. Haiji claims he'll forge the bow right out of this hole. The dragon stares up at him, completely lost. He kicks off his blacksmithing lesson, lays out the first step for Kroll, then starts shaping a sand mold. With the big pit she dug, he shows the next move, setting up the wooden pattern, and he tells her his secret. He'll use a special agent to harden the sand around that pattern so it won't crumble. He digs in with full focus, drops to his knees, and scrapes the sand over the wooden form until it packs tight, hardens, and locks everything in place. Cruel stared in awe, gasping at how tough the sand had turned, and told her that the next move was to carefully pry off the wooden pattern. With the pattern finally peeled away, the sand flashes a flawless imprint, and that first stage of the whole process is officially done. Next up, casting. Haiji orders Cruel to haul a crucible brimming with searing, glowing molten metal, and she nods yes instantly, no questions asked. He freezes for a split second, stunned by what he just told her, then the shock hits, because for one beat, he totally blanks on who she is, before he snaps back and orders her to dump the contents straight into the hole. She grabs the searing crucible with bare hands like it's nothing, then smirks that her flames burn hotter than his. And while Haiji stares in disbelief, she pours the liquid metal into the sand mold, waits for it to cool, then yanks out the finished metal bar, sealing the fifth and final step. Cradling the finished piece, Kuru-chan's eyes widen. She can't believe how shockingly light it is. Haiji grins and tells her it's an iron, but from his world, it's made with a metal called aluminium, and you can tell he's genuinely thrilled the whole process worked. She stared at the metal bar, confused by how light it felt, and HG snapped back that this aluminium was tough yet easy to mold, so he planned to bend it into a bow. She got it and snapped up the job, and he laughed under his breath, because even with her monstrous power, molding that special alloy was still going to fight back. With a guttural shove, she poured every ounce of power into the task, forcing that metal bar to bend into a flawless curve. Then she shot the finished bow shape up for Hagi to see, grinning like she'd just won. He shoved the finished bow into her hands and told her to pull it back and try it, bragging that he'd woven her own dragon scales into the design. Then, the moment she drew the string, the whole weapon flickered to life with a soft, faint glow. Her eyes flared with pure joy as she burst out that Hagi was unbelievable, because that bow held tight and never snapped, not even under her brutal strength. While she toasted her brand new weapon in the background, Haiji suddenly fell into deep thought, staring at that Kaga incident in his mind, praying this bow would actually work. Then Cruel leaned over and asked if she could watch him too, and Haiji nodded without hesitation. The hunt kicked off for real. Hidden away, they clocked their prey, a massive tusked boar. Haiji gawked in disbelief at how huge it was, trying to make sure this monster was really their target. Cruel nodded and told him, plain and simple, watch every move. She yanked the bowstring back with brutal force, and the aluminium frame screamed under the pressure, while Haiji panicked, yelling that she was pulling way too hard. With a vicious twang, Cruel fires the bowstring, eyes locked and razor-focused, as her arrow tears through the forest, barely holding its shape under that crushing strain. The arrow hits dead center, boom. A blazing flash detonates on the giant boar, blasting the impact area and scattering the surrounding foliage like it's paper. She whips around to him, eyes blazing, shouting that the bow he built is absolutely incredible, while Haiji, still stunned by what he just saw, can only sputter back that it's her who's truly amazing. Cruel swears it was the bow's power, insisting no normal person could drop a demon boar with one clean shot, yet Haiji just freezes in deep thought, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. He keeps thinking, it was only an aluminium bow, the kind he'd treat like an S-rank kitchen knife. And then a sickening question claws its way into his mind. What the hell did he actually forge? In a ramshackle wooden cabin tucked between the trees, Haiji hovered over a bubbling pot while the Cruel girl leaned in close, her tail twitching as she grinned, and said the meal looked delicious. The party stew roars as it boils, thick chunks of meat churning inside, and it blasts steaming clouds into the air like it's alive. AG tells him it's brown because the base is miso, soybeans fermented with salt and koji. Then he scoops some into a bowl and urges her to dive in and finish it. With a grateful smile, she raises a chunk of meat to her lips. She bursts with delight and shouts, "This is unbelievably delicious." Haiji happily digs in, then points out that the meat is from the prey she just caught, and grins that he's glad he decided to make the miso, because he learned that skill during his time at the royal palace. His expression tightens into deep thought as he stares at that plain kitchen knife, and he can't stop asking himself, how on earth does an S-rank blade get forged from something this simple? Then it hits him, he's back in that moment. A stern, scarred man slams a blade toward his chest and rips into him, roaring that Haji is always coddled by his parents, just a useless nobody who only ever churns out Durank or Irank items. He sat alone in silence, letting that brutal memory loop in his head as he wondered, quietly but painfully, whether his old master was still doing okay. The exact same master craftsman lounged outside that grand building, puffing his pipe while wondering out loud if Haiji was even holding up. Then his two co-workers, a bald blacksmith and a younger man, froze in shock. The bald one shot back, asking why Haiji's name was being dragged up and whether he was scared of him. The master snapped, scowling hard, and demanded what that question was supposed to mean. The bald blacksmith kept going, huffing at the master that he'd yelled at Hagi and never even bothered to see him off, then replayed Hagi's stiff little smile as everyone stared, until he snapped that it had to be because Hagi couldn't make items in that required range. His colleague's guess was dead wrong. Those master craftsmen snapped that the swords and armor Haiji forged were only just at the bottom, a rank. The bald man blinked, replaying a rank like he couldn't believe it. Then the master swung on him, furious, and demanded to know who in the world ever claimed Haiji was the one who got angry. With his arms crossed, he laid out his reasoning, because if he'd ever been even a little lenient with Haiji, the boy would have gotten comfortable and coasted. His strictness wasn't for show. It was mandatory, since Haiji's job was to forge only B-rank items, nothing else. His colleagues still couldn't wrap their heads around it, so the younger craftsman blurted, asking if making rank items was actually bad. Then a memory hit, and the master's voice thundered, calling Hagi a fool for crafting rank equipment after he'd been told, plain as day, to make beer. Rage exploded across the master's face. He bellowed that he couldn't stand seeing Hagi, ordered the A-rank weapons handed to the soldiers first, and then banished Hagi on the spot. His colleagues stared in disbelief, and the younger one finally understood the truth. Hagi wasn't exiled for being useless. He was thrown out because he was painfully talented. He snapped back to the present, took one long smoking drag from his pipe, and blurted that maybe the king's clever setup had a deeper purpose. Then his mind raced to what would have happened if he'd truly tossed Hagi aside the first time, his voice fading as he got swallowed up by that day's memories. In a clearing just outside the city, Cruel's cruel doubts crawl in. She stares ahead and thinks, this country is done for, then whips around to Hagi and demands what he's up to because she thought he was finally taking the day off. Hagi admits he's got something he wants to test, and Cruel snaps back right away, eager to jump in and help. He stared at the rough forge he'd built, weighing the secret behind the S-ranked one in the capital, and deciding that this plain outdoor setup wouldn't be bothered by any special properties it might have. With a razor-sharp grin, she turns Cruel and admits handling the temperature outside is a nightmare. Then she asks for my help, and I jump at the chance, ready to step in. He gets to work, and like he always does, Hagi heads for the fire while Cruel casually hoists a huge, heavy bucket of water for Quenkish. A moment later, he throws his voice out, done, then lifts the freshly forged kitchen knife, eyes blazing with cold pride as he admires its beauty, even though it was forged in such a bare little spot. He hauls the fresh blade up to a huge tree stump, then pauses, because without the appraisal skill, he can't tell if it's A-rank or S-rank just by staring at it, and that thought hits hard, so he decides he's going to test it. In one sharp flick, he hurls the knife, and it sinks deep into the stump, cracking it open as a blazing, unstoppable light erupts. He clocks it instantly. It's exactly like the sword from that time. He locks eyes with the glowing blade, and then everything hits him at once. The sword he forged in the royal smithy had split clean in two, just like this knife he hammered outside, so now he's freaking out, wondering if this means the same fate or a brand new ray. He grips the brand new knife, still weighing what it can do, and wonders if some hidden force is brewing inside the royal forge, while Cruel's jaw drops in pure awe, shouting that his blade is insane for slicing a sword clean in half. Her bright praise dies mid-breath as her pointed ear flicks, snatching a far-off sound, someone's coming. A visitor. She blurts, then she bolts straight into the woods, and poor Hagi just stands there, stunned, scrambling to figure out who on earth would show up. In the blink of an eye, she shifts into her true draconic form, rockets into the sky on thunderous wing beats, then shouts that she'll go greet their guest. He watches her vanish into the far distance, a tiny speck against the sky, then his eyes snap to a woman trudging toward him on foot, young, worn out, and completely wrecked emotionally, so he blurts her name the second he realizes who it is. Right after that, they're inside his home. Philnell clutches a glass of water and blurts out an apology for the sudden knock, saying something shocked her so hard she rushed straight here without even thinking. She leans in and tells him she's sure she's holding him back, and Hagi listens with worry in his eyes, while Cruel, back in her human form, stands guard beside the table. Cruel boldly cuts Philnell off, brushing her worries aside, then snaps that the Deletive Forest is a nightmare, crawling with monsters and guarded by nobody. With a wicked grin, she offers her services on the spot, telling Philnell that if she wants a carriage, all she has to do is call her. This offer feels like it finally pulls Philnell straight into the real reason she came. Her smile drops, her face hardens, and she lays it out. Someone made a claim about the knife. Hagi and Cruel lock eyes, both stunned to the bone, and then they burst out. A claim, with their disbelief snapping through every word. Her shock snaps into furious rage. Why? She roars, her draconic eyes blazing, and all she can think is this. Hagi's knife is incredible. So what on earth could possibly go wrong with it? He tries to calm her down, urging Cruel to rein it in, then whips his worried eyes back to the merchant. What's happening, Philnell? He demands. She stalls for a beat, then speaks in a low voice. It's too sharp. She starts spilling the tale. This knife was meant for the head chef of a client, but the new cook secretly grabbed it instead, and in a rush his grip failed and the knife slipped right out of his hands. A blade came crashing down like a falling comet. And the moment after that is the part she swears will blow your mind. It was so razor-sharp, she says, that it almost took a chunk out of the new cook's foot as it dropped. Then the blade slammed into the floor with a violent thud, driving its tip deep into the stone. Right after she finishes her tale, she suddenly crumples to the floor, bowing so low her forehead slams into the wood. Hey G, I recognize your incredible skill, she cries, her voice shaking with raw anguish, as if every ounce of pain and effort behind it is burning through her. He gazes down at her bowed figure, and the rage in his face melts into sympathy, because he knows exactly how it feels when a craftsman's work gets dismissed as useless. He tells her he gets the sting, the helpless squeeze of that moment, and with a gentle voice he urges, "Please, Phil Noel, raise your head." He stared at her like a decision had just snapped into place and declared his plan. He'd forge a knife on purpose so dull it couldn't cut. Hearing that, Phil Nell's eyes flooded with tears, and she choked out his name, while he finally admitted the truth. Chasing a razor-perfect edge was just a craftsman's pride. The only thing that mattered was thinking about the person who'd used that tool in the end. She stared at the freshly forged blade in his grip, eyes wide with shock, and blurted, "No way, this has to be an A-rank kitchen knife." He nodded, confirming it was exactly what he'd just forged. Filmo's appraisal stamped that knife as A-rank, no questions asked, yet the blade he'd forged before was supposedly S-rank, and nobody could explain why it was so absurdly powerful. Once the new design got the green light, he slapped the table and swore production would start. Phil Nell grabbed his hand on the spot, nodding hard and thrilled at the deal. A few days later, it was finally over. The deal was sealed. Hagi stood by the roadside and waved hard as Phil Nell rode off, horse in tow, with cart now packed to the brim with all his goods. She came back grinning from ear to ear, saying every last knife was completely gone, and he just stared at her, stunned, blurting, "You're serious?" She told me the knives were flying off the shelves, faster than she could even restock them, because her plan to go after housewives had worked like a charm, and now she was getting swarmed by hungry customers, all of them begging for a knife of their own. She beams at Haiji, raving that the knives are top-notch, and tells him to stop underplaying it. This is all because of his marketing. Haiji, a little overwhelmed, just lets out a nervous laugh. With wide, earnest eyes, she leans in and tells him they've already gotten more orders, then asks, real quick, if he can whip up 100 more knives for them. His face drains of color in pure shock. 100, he blurts, stunned by how massive the request is. Then he snaps back, questioning her humility, because at the end of the day, she's the one who has to pay up front for the materials. That order presses down on him like a mountain, and all he can pull off is a strained, exhausted laugh. That night, a savage storm slams into the forest, rain hammers the trees, and lightning tears open the dark sky with every crack. In the middle of the storm, Cruel stands alone, drenched to the bone, her face set in pure grit as she mutters under her breath, like she's bracing for the next hit. She pushes deeper through the rain-choked woods, eyes blazing through the dark, frantically trying to figure out where her target is hiding. Rain pounds the roof of a tiny rustic cabin, dripping from the eaves, and inside the wooden bucket creeps to fill as a leak in the ceiling keeps spilling water drop by drop. Inside, the hero stares at the pounding rain and mutters that this leaky roof can't keep getting patched. It needs a real, lasting fix. A thunderous shout erupts right behind him, shattering his focus. He jolts in shock and spins around, only to find her there, Cruel, drenched and soaked, her face looming in that unsettling shadow. Her menacing look crumbles into a mischievous grin, and slick with rain, she tilts her head, asking with a playful tone if she startled him. He let out a sigh of relief, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. Then Cruel stood out in the rain, smiling as broken roof planks clattered down around her, saying the whole chaos felt as refreshing as a cold bath and thanking him for the emergency repairs. As she dries off, a tiny sneeze slips out. Then he whips his head around, alarmed, only for her to wave it off fast and claim that, being a dragon, catching a cold is just impossible. It whips away, cheeks burning, clutching a cloth in his hands as he desperately tries not to stare at her soaked clothes, sticking to her back. Wanting a better warm-up, he pitches the idea of making a meal, and as the pot starts to simmer, Cruel can't wait, practically bursting out. "So what are we eating for dinner?" Inside their little home, a huge pot of braised meat keeps bubbling away. Haiji leans in and tells everyone it came straight from the giant boar they just took down. Right next to him, Cure's eyes light up with savage excitement, loving how soft the meat looks and how mouthwatering that soup smell hits like a promise. She takes that first bite, and her face lights up like magic, pure bliss flooding her features. "Oh my God," she blurts, stunned by how tender and sweet it is. Then she goes, dead serious. This is the best food she's ever tasted in her entire life. She's perched at the table when she suddenly throws her arms up, celebrating like she just won, swearing that every dish HG makes is straight up delicious, then smiling as he asks, with a tiny grin, whether she really says that every single time she eats his cookies. Gaze leans in and snatches the last chunks of meat from the pot, wishing he could level it up with some cock-coney seasoning. Then he grimly realizes this world doesn't even have mirin or soy sauce. He keeps racking his brain about what food they can even make here, wondering if anyone in this place has ever brewed dashi, and then it hits him. Maybe a past hero summoned before him planted those ideas. So yeah, he decides he should probably grab a bite and try for himself. He stares at his empty bowl and those waiting chopsticks, and then, bam, reality hits him like a jolt. He flicks a look at Cruel, still chomping like she owns the place, and pure irritation flashes across his face as he realizes, at this rate, she'll leave him with not a single bite. Right as Cruel's chopsticks shoot toward the pot, Cruel lunges in first and clamps onto the meat he was eyeing. Then she snaps, cuts him off with a sharp shush, and spins on him with a deadly glare, asking if he was trying to steal her portion. She and Haiji crouched under their cover and peered out, eyes sharp, nerves screaming as they scanned the room. Next, their eyes blow wide with the exact same shock. Right as they panic, a mysterious young girl with cat ears drops out of nowhere and starts tearing into the food on their table. Then she locks eyes with them and vows, "You're not getting away." A second later, the girl's hanging upside down, spinning in dizzy circles, and she blurts out non-stop apologies, confessing she's a terrible thief who stole Haiji's horn. Tears burn up in her eyes as she keeps apologizing, insisting she was starving. Cruel's patience snaps right there as she glares, telling the girl she can't just steal what isn't hers just because hunger's driving her crazy. Haiji softens his tone, spots Sue soaked to the bone, and asks if she got trapped in the rain, and Sue admits she was out there hunting for something in the downpour. Then Haiji waves off her fears about the horn and tells her to forget it, even as her cruel, ongoing anger won't quit. Kindness hits her like a wave, and she collapses completely, tears pouring down her face as she begs Haiji for help, urgently urging him to find her papa and mama. Soon enough, the three are huddled at the table, and Soot digs in with fresh, joyful energy, practically grinning at how delicious everything tastes, while Haiji keeps watching her and bluntly asks if that means she's a lost child. Sue digs in with pure gusto, blurting that she's from the Divine Beast clan that calls the Dalida Forest home, right as Cruel watches her like a hawk and zeroes in, calling her out as a White Wolf tribe member. She scoffs at the title Divine Beast, insisting her power blows that out of the water, while Haiji, stunned by the whole exchange, can only stammer out, "God," like he can't believe what he just heard. His confusion hits the moment you understand Dalida Forest. Everyone calls it the Forest of Spirits and Divine Beasts, but the truth is way darker. Most of what lives there are just demonic beasts in disguise. Among the true Divine Beasts, the tribes are fiercely territorial, and Sue's White Wolf clan are the so-called vagrants, always on the move, never staying put. They're crossing this endless land, and one question won't let up. Why is the Dalida Forest, their home, so freaking enormous? AG digs into the intel and snaps, "So you've got 200 of them in the capital." Cruel shoots back that this isn't some cute little game. Sue, hearing it all, drops her face, remembering the words that still haunt her, how they told her she'd just be a burden. Her heartbreak snaps into pure defiance. She lunges into the truth, shouting with clenched fists, insisting it didn't happen like that, right as Haiji asks if she really got kicked out of her pack. Cruel answers coldly, "Once someone leaves, they don't come back." Haiji's eyes widen as it clicks. Sue isn't just gone, she's permanently exiled. He stares at the tiny, determined girl in front of him, and their eyes lock, like they just shared the same secret without a single word. A jolt of memory slammed into Haiji, an older man's stern, judging stare clashing with the boy he once was, whipping his back to the royal court and walking off, leaving the king behind with a heavy sack thumping over his shoulder. As Cruel's voice snapped his name into the air, the memory crumbled away and he slammed back into the present. Then he soothed her with a gentle hand on her head, telling her she had nothing to fear. Then he whipped around to the tearful Sue and swore, without hesitation, that he'd be the one to find her parents. Cruel stared them both down, face completely unreadable as his decision sank in. Now that their new mission was locked in, the crew tore away from what they knew and charged straight into the huge unknown, beyond the familiar trail. Draped in his armor, Hagi charged into the forest, with Sue on his side, cruel as ever, but grinning now that the despair had vanished. Her fresh excitement sent her stumbling over a twisted, gnarly path, and Haiji snapped fast to warn her to tone down the noise before she hurt herself. She snapped herself upright and blurted out a bright thanks, but his reply got yanked away the second the top of her dress slipped down, baring her shoulders and freezing her face in pure, mortified embarrassment, while he just stared, stunned. As the three push through the forest side by side, Cruel leans in and warns Haiji not to spoil Sue too much, and Haiji grins back, agreeing with her, then reminds her softly but firmly that Sue is still just a kid. She drops her thoughts in private and thinks it through. Sue is a divine beast, born with a naturally strict temperament, so she's convinced that babying her will only stunt her growth. Her advice hits a wall. Hagi just smiles and placates her, like it's all fine and she's fuming. She throws her hands up and snaps, asking if he was even listening at all. That argument hits Sue like a shock. She blushes hard when it clicks that Cruel wasn't just playing around, he genuinely cared about her. And the wild part, she'd been convinced all this time that Cruel couldn't stand her. Haiji shoots a quick glance back, eyes saying everything, and then he spots that Cruel's scaled tail flicking back and forth like a tell, proving that no matter how sharp her words are, she's not really hating the girl. Once she made her point, Cruel snapped into her real form, a breathtaking white dragon, and roared that she'd scout the area from the sky, then told the other two to wait until she came back. Paige and Sue huddled side by side as the massive dragon shot up into the sky, then vanished into the far distance. To kill the time while they wait, he drops onto a rock, yanks out a chunk of wood and his carving knife from his pack, and starts cutting away like he's got nowhere else to be. He clocked that Cruel still hadn't come back from her scouting flight, then snapped his focus to the other teammate and yelled, "Hey, Sue, when you..." When the reply never came, he whipped his head around, and there she was, the young girl sprawled in the grass, already knocked out cold. He blurted a quiet gasp of surprise. She passed out into a deep, peaceful sleep, a calm smile tugging at her lips, and in her dreams she whispered about how quiet everything was, nothing like her usual loud, chaotic life. He watched her and couldn't stop smiling, then gently scratched her head between her ears, like some proud, clueless parent, and as soon as the moment settled, he decided that next time he'd craft her something out of oak. From the dark guts of the forest, a pack of monstrous, wolf-like beasts bursts out, fur slick and black, teeth snapping in savage snarls, and blazing eyes locking onto their prey as they surge forward. Even their approach gets noticed. Suskat's twitching ears snap forward and spin, hunting the exact spot where the danger is about to strike. A sudden jolt of alertness snaps Haiji's focus. She clamps a finger to her lips and shoots him a sharp, urgent SHH, face taut with panic, and the second he sees what she's looking at, he understands the danger and they both swing their attention toward the threat. They huddle at the clearing's edge, staring into the thick woods where that terrifying noise keeps spilling out, and the air turns heavy with raw, breathless anticipation. Pure terror snaps onto Sue's face the second she realizes what's coming, her fangs peeking out as she chokes out the name in dread, Ashuhao. He grimaces as her words land, and suddenly he remembers the Ashuhounds, sea-rank monsters that devour hope. When he realizes they're boxed in with nowhere to run, the trap snaps shut. Sue tilts her head up, and her terrified eyes tell him everything is already going wrong. But he can't afford a single second. He moves like lightning, scoops the startled Sue into his arms and snaps, "We're out of here." He pivots hard and rockets into a sprint, diving deeper into the forest. Then he blurts a worry about the luggage, swats it aside, and screams that he can grab it later. Survival is the only thing that matters. He sprinted through the tall grass, his boots thundering through the muddy earth as he drove his body past every limit. Behind him, the Ashore hounds pounded through the undergrowth, their hulking, shadowy blurs roaring right at his heels. Even with danger breathing down their necks, Sue looked thrilled. She flashed that grin and blurted that Hagi was running way too fast. But Hagi was fighting for breath, muttering to himself that sure, he might look like an old man, yet he was still the former hero. Even as a former hero, rotten and flawed, but packed with killer unique skills, that cursed experience was what fueled his insane stamina. All he had to do was last a little longer until they finally hit the blacksmith's forge. He spotted a tiny abandoned hut up ahead, and a plan snapped into place. Those demonic beasts were drawn straight to the scent of fire, so if he could bait them into that hut, he'd finally have a shot. Right when he thought victory was practically in his pocket, a ferocious growl exploded from right behind him. A hound exploded forward, hot breath blasting out, as its sharp fangs snapped shut on the distance in an instant. Attacks slammed into him, and he stumbled to the ground hard. Then he looked up to see the nightmare closing in, two beasts flanking him, their eyes blazing with pure, predatory hunger. He realized he was boxed in, surrounded from every side, because these beasts weren't just dangerous, they were smart. Right then, a tiny figure slipped out behind him. Sue, who snapped, "Put me down now." She slid into position beside him, and they stood back to back as a vicious pack closed in around them. Then came the cold, sharp, metallic snap of danger. He yanked out his knife, bracing for the fight that was coming whether they liked it or not. He flicked his eyes back to the little girl and barked, "Stay back." Then he scanned the hounds, too many, packed in like a storm. He knew keeping Sue safe while he fought them off was going to be a monster of a task. But she refused to back down, cat-eared and fearless. She screamed a ferocious, defiant roar, her small face twisting with shocking intensity, and Haiji could only freeze, stunned by how brave she was. Her bravery hit him like a punch, and he couldn't stop asking himself why he'd even show up when a kid so small was fighting with pure, unshakable spirit. Right then, he realized Sue was the real hero, more than he ever was. That thought slammed into place and hardened his resolve. If you couldn't shield a single child, you didn't get to call yourself a hero, not even if you were just being used as bait. Just as his grit kicked in, one of the hounds exploded forward and got met straight on by Sue's ferocious counter. Right as the beast tried to strike, a shadowy whip lashed out at lightning speed, snapping in to block the hit with a violent blur. The hound got slammed to the ground, cut clean by a salt strike. The rest of the pack jerked back in shock, and grim satisfaction spread across Haji's face as he silently told himself, "All right." He keeps his eyes on the beast still standing, worry carved into his face, while the hounds act like nothing happened. Losing their packmate doesn't even rattle them, their growls roaring through the air. He stews with anger inside, realizing his big show of force scared nobody. Then his gaze snaps to the rocky ledge above, where a towering, many-tailed beast looms, watching everything unfold like a judge, and he instantly knows it's the pack's leader. He snaps to the truth in an instant. No other move exists. To even breathe tomorrow, he has to take down that leader, period. And as he locks onto his target, his resolve turns to steel. But just as he's about to move, a giant shadow crashes over the clearing. Then a massive white dragon sweeps down from the heavens, wings blazing wide, shaking the air like thunder. A deep, ancient roar bounces through the forest as the dragon interrogates the hounds face to face, furious that they tormented Haji and Sue. Relief hits Haji like a thunderclap, and a huge grin bursts across his face the second he recognizes the magnificent creature. Cruel, he screams, while Sue just stares up at it, eyes wide with pure awe. The great dragon unleashes a brutal attack, and the Ashu hounds scatter like leaves in a storm. Haji freezes in shock as the few that survive whip around and bolt, and a fresh dread claws at his thoughts. Their escape route cuts dangerously close to the subjugation grounds. Right then, his gaze snaps back to the dragon, where he sees a bunch of figures standing there, totally calm on her back. Sue's tribe, the White Wolf people, watching down as the enemy scrambles. Sue stood in front of the newcomers, and he watched her ears twitch with pure nerves. Before he could even react, one of the male tribe members erupted with a devastating power, obliterating the final Asho hounds in a brutal instant. He froze, jaw dropped at the insane power he'd just witnessed, and then the long-haired warrior turned back to him, cool as ice, and said Hagi had been tending to their suit all along. The warrior grinned and named them all, the White Wolf tribe. Then one of his brothers stepped forward and thanked Haji for risking his life to keep the young girl safe. His focus snapped the moment that cruel, now human form tore out of the trees and screamed his name, so fast he could only blurt her name in stunned shock. She yanked him into a tight hug and breathed out in pure relief, her voice shaking as she told him she was just so happy he was safe. Then she apologized for leaving him there alone. During the reunion, Sue got pinned against Haji's chest, her face burning a deep crimson, while the rest of the White Wolf tribe watched with amused smiles. With a hard release, she let go. Cruel spun to Sue and thanked her for saving Haji, while right beside them a short-haired female from the tribe stared, then blurted out that Sue couldn't have been the one who truly protected her. That reunion only happened because Kroll moved like lightning, soaring high above. She caught Sue's cry on the wind and instantly knew the girl was shielding. Back on the ground, every shred of doubt she'd carried vanished in an instant. Now she clung to her in a tight, grateful hug, thanking her over and over for her sheer bravery. After the hug, Sue gripped a tiny object she didn't recognize, stared up at Haji with wide, curious eyes, and demanded to know what he had just handed her. He told them Sue was a divine beast, a god bell, and the moment the words landed, everyone in the White Wolf tribe went quiet, staring in pure, breathless awe. He kept talking, made it crystal clear it was a cowbell, and swore that if she wore it, she'd be protected, and the tribe's leader didn't even hesitate to back him up. And just like that, with the gift handed over and accepted, the time to say goodbye finally slammed into place, while the White Wolf tribe erupted into cheers, waving like crazy and shouting farewell to Haji and Cruel. They strode off, then spun around to wave one last time, while Sue's brand new bell chimed happily behind us, soft but cheering. Sometime later, in his brand new quiet home, Haji cooked up a simple meal, cracked an egg into a bowl, and while the smell filled the room, he couldn't stop thinking about how cruel she must be, hungry and waiting for him. He sits down at the table, then an irate, cruel woman explodes in front of him, slamming her hands down and yelling, demanding answers about her food. She rants that she'd been so excited for what he brought back from town, yet her portion is gone, and she claims he ate it himself. He doesn't flinch, he stays calm and flat out denies it, saying it wasn't him. He snaps that if she's going to blame him, she could at least give him a chance to talk, because he's not the culprit. They lock eyes, and right when the tension feels unbearable, a tiny clatter cuts through the silence. Then it hits him on the boat, like a light bulb finally flickering on. Their eyes snap to the noise. Then there's Sue, popping out from under the table, licking her fingers clean like it's nothing, while Haji blurts her name in total disbelief. With a blissful grin and a crumb still stuck to her cheek, Sue looks right up, totally unbothered, and she casually says cheerfully that she got separated from her group again. In Wuril, relentless rain hammered the grand royal castle, soaking every spire as a crushing dark sky loomed overhead. From the hallway, the master craftsman stares at the bleak sky and snarls that this pounding rain will wreck their iron. Then, with pure frustration, he snaps at someone out of sight to hurry and seal the leak. Elsewhere in the castle, the royal minister explodes with rage at the same kind of trouble, bellowing about why a stain is crawling onto the pale blue ceiling, and how that leak is trashing a precious blue dye imported from another country. He roars louder, barking orders at the servant to hurry up and seal that leak right now, and the servant scrambles across the floor, slapping a wooden tub down to catch the dripping water. While the master blacksmith and his partner rush in to report to the master craftsman, they tell him the palace main corridor is leaking again, and it's spreading somewhere else too. Meanwhile, the furious royal minister stomps through the background, rage blazing, but the craftsman just stays calm and unbothered. He takes a drag from his pipe, and without a twitch, he just agrees. Then he tells you how, for the last 2 or 3 years, ever since Hiro Hagi showed up, those leaks have vanished like magic. One blacksmith blurts out that he can't believe it, while the other just stares and points out that their smithy roof tiles are shaped unlike everyone else's, because wow, they're genuinely beautiful. The master craftsman swings his hand and tells them their break is done, back to the smithy now. As the bell rings and his crew files out, he just stares into the rain, quietly wondering what Haji's doing at this very moment. By a rustic wooden house, Cruel and Sue roll up on Haji with huge, bright grins, and Cruel asks what his plans are for the day. Sue immediately jumps in right beside him, curious what they're about to get into. Since that cottage has turned into a tight squeeze, he's decided to gut it and renovate, cranking out a simple floor plan where he'll tear down a few walls, push the rooms bigger, and carve out a whole new guest space. Sue watches with worry as she reminds him that the White Wolf tribe has temporarily placed her under his care, and that he'll still need rooms for the other kids too. Cruel doubles down on his explanation, saying that besides the house, they'll be retiling the forge's roof too, and she calls it the big job of the day, leaving Sue staring, completely confused, and asking what retiling even means. He breaks down how it all works. The tiles are molded from clay, then stacked in layers to crush the heat, and the roof keeps the forge chill in summer while holding on to warmth in winter, perfect for the steady temperature he's chasing for his work. Cruel remarks cut in, claiming his description matches her own scales to the letter. Haji snaps along, fully bought in, and drives home the plan. They're heading to the mountains to hunt for clay, and both Cruel and Suture roar in enthusiastic agreement. Moments later, in a rocky patch of forest, Haji slams a shovel into the ground and strikes a rich vein of earth, while Sue beside him beams and proudly cradles a huge chunk of freshly dug clay. She snaps his digging to a halt, eyes locked on Sue as she holds up the clay for Cruel, who's fully flaunting that massive white dragon form, and with a calm, precise motion, Cruel grabs the clay and slots it into a big wooden crate strapped to her back, sealing it in for the ride. Back on their homestead, Hagi dives into the next step, gathering a huge mound of damp clay and grinding it with his bare feet, while Sue watches the steady rhythm and murmurs his name as the raw stuff for their big plan gets ready. She kneads focus into a tiny clay figurine of cruelty, then presents it with a dramatic flourish, and he can't help but blink at how impressively well it's made, like she might have been hiding real talent all along. So he turns to Sue and tells her she can help too. Then he jabs a finger at a giant wooden contraption in the workshop and fires the question, what's the cannon even for? Haji thinks it's a weapon, but the guy grins and corrects him. It's no cannon at all, it's an extruder machine. He starts breaking it down, telling them to dump the clay into the top opening first. Then with the molding plate in place, all 3 of them, Haji, Cruel and Sue, slam down hard on a massive lever, squeezing the clay out into one long, perfectly uniform strip. As the clay slab sits on the table, brutal cheers explode. She made it. Hage jumps in and says the secret is simple, push dead straight down with real force. Then with a sharp grin, he declares the next move, cut the slab. He shows off how to drag a wire through that massive chunk of clay to split it into neat little tiles, while Kroll and Sue stare, eyes locked, tracking every move. Then he tells everyone that once the cutting's done, the tiles have to spread out and dry for days. And once they're dry, a kiln is a must, so he pushes for a simple one they can build outside. Cruel and Sue can't wait, and they both jump in with eager agreement. His orders land, and the 2 girls burst into action, digging a pit kiln like it's go time. HG lays out the design as they work, and once those 2 underground holes are connected, fresh oxygen starts flowing, keeping the kiln blazing hot enough to fire. Once the kiln's ready, the real work kicks off. Those dry tiles get dipped in glaze, then stacked with care inside the firing pit. Inside the kiln pit, the tiles blaze under insane heat, and the whole process is so touchy. Each tile has to be dipped in glaze, then fired slow, or the temperature shock will split them wide open. The result hits like thunder. Haiji, surrounded by cheering Cruel and Sue, lifts a flawless, perfectly shaped tile and declares, loud and proud, it's done. You lift the tile up for them to see and explain how the glaze makes a glass-slick surface that shrugs off water and dirt, and Sue can't stop marveling at how shiny and smooth it looks. With everything set, Haiji declares it's time to lay the tiles on the roof, and they all snap in, cheering in perfect unison. Their excitement is electric as they thrust their fists into the air, screaming that the next phase of construction is about to begin. Just when they're about to celebrate, Haji storms in from the brand new roof, warning them not to celebrate yet because they haven't checked for leaks. So Cruel snaps and blasts the roof with a brutal torrent of water, soaking the startled Haji to the bone. He braces himself on the slick roof, wipes water off his face, and mutters that he almost ate the ground below. Sue calls up, asking about leaks, and Cruel, with a worried look, asks if he's okay, and he shoots back that he's totally fine. His reassurance lands, then a triumphant voice booms from the rooftop, "Test passed." And down below, Cruel and Sue explode into joyous cheers, celebrating like they just won the whole world. With the roof finally in place, Haiji shifts his focus to the next step of the forge renovation. He raises his hammer, and just then the master craftsman closes in, reminding him that when Haiji was only a decorative hero, his life wasn't all monster fights. He covered whatever jobs needed doing when they were short-staffed. The master points out that tile making is one of those tasks, then orders Haiji to get moving. He's out there working the glaze, lost in the memories of those old, classy red tiles, pretty as a picture, but built to fall apart, so he keeps whipping up fresh glaze again and again, stuck in non-stop repairs from the jobs they keep throwing at him. Right when his mind starts running, the master craftsman explodes, screaming that the royal minister is a total fool. He tells a worried Haji, "I warned them the forge's roof was completely ruined, but that minister never even came near the hero, so those old tiles kept getting smashed under the weight of long years." Later outside, he hails Kroll and orders her to bring him a pot, and she, along with a curious Sue, stares as he works, while Kroll demands what he's planning, and he just grins and warns her, "Don't you peek." His hard work pays off. There it is, a pot of perfectly cooked potatoes, and the moment the aroma hits the air, someone blurts, "Those look insanely delicious." Cruel and Sue couldn't wait to dig in, but he snapped at them to hold up for just one more moment. Then he whips out a tiny container and asks if they want their potatoes even tastier, pulling out horse butter like it's the secret ingredient, and saying he'll slice straight across the top of each potato, leaving Sue and Cruel completely baffled. He proves it by dropping a slice of butter onto a blazing hot potato, then just watches it melt in real time, swearing that this is the ultimate way to eat it, and telling them to pay close attention. They follow his lead, and both Cruel and Sue snap in a bite. Then that rich flavor hits like a wave, blasting them with pure, stunned delight. Sue and she dive into the potatoes like they're unstoppable, shoveling them in, while Haiji barks at them to slow down and reminds them the butter's a super expensive luxury. With their hunger finally crushed, Sue grinned and called it the perfect reward for all their work, while from the kitchen, Haiji noted they may not have much, but there was still a little butter left. A few days later, he shows up in the forest with an axe riding his shoulder, locks onto the perfect tree, and swings with everything he's got, eyes blazing with determination. Right as the blade is about to land, a savage flash of light explodes from the tree trunk, so bright it blinds him, shoving him backward onto the ground as he yells, stunned, and demands where it came from. Cruel and Sue burst in at once, sprinting to his side, Cruel snapping, "Why were you trying to cut down that doll by the tree?" while Sue hisses that he's about to get absolutely scolded for what he just did. She snaps back, asking if he's really set on getting punished for cutting the tree, and even though he's still barely standing, he shoots back, "Who's going to punish me?" Then it hits, the name Dalada, and suddenly he realizes she's the one behind this whole forest. Cruel tells them Dalada is the forest's great god, and chopping a tree without permission will summon their wrath. Sue shakes like a leaf as she blurts that a furious Dalada is worse than even her own father. He demanded what kind of scary she meant, but she wouldn't look at him, grim-faced, because what she was saying was pure cruelty, and to him, it would be the absolute worst. At that brutal warning, Sue's face turns ghost-white as terror grips her. She can't even handle the idea that someone could erase her from the world completely. She tells them Dalada's half-body sometimes flashes through the forest, and Haiji, still reeling, demands answers. Is this happening again? Because why would chopping down just one tree unleash a blast of divine power like that? She keeps talking, saying that when things get this bad, you need to make an offering to Dalada right at the foot of the tree. Meanwhile, Haiji just stares, totally baffled, and out of nowhere, his mind flips to one random urge. He wants to eat. He snaps into it. He wants a potato with butter. He blurts an apology, says he's already cut up the butter, then stops cold, staring at the thought like, why am I even thinking about this right now? His twisted confession leaves both the Cruel One and Sue reeling, staring him down with wide eyes, mouths hanging open, stunned that he even still has butter, and that it's the only thing he cares about. No matter how ridiculous it sounds, they carefully set one plain potato, crowned with a big, buttery dollop, at the great tree's roots like it's sacred. Moments later, warm light spills from the offering, and Sue snaps into it, chirping with joy as if to say Dalada loved every bite and feels completely satisfied. Haiji stares at the glowing warmth, and it hits him. Now he has to use the wood he cut with ruthless care. After the forest gods are appeased, the whole crew erupts into celebration with a massive feast, and Haiji lifts his cup, booming that the wood they snagged came through, because their room's renovation is finally done. From the edge of the woods, a woman with short, light hair slips behind a tree and stares out like she's hunting answers, wrapped in revealing dark armor with a sword at her hip. Her eyes lock onto a lone wooden house in the distance, and as recognition hits, she practically mutters, "So that's the house." In a loud tavern, the armored hero Haiji blurts out a cry, then gets yanked down to the floor, staring up in pure shock at the elf swordswoman looming over him. Light hair and dark skin, her hand resting coolly on her weapon hilt. Haiji clenches his teeth, trying to figure out who this terrifying force could be. The scene snaps forward to an elf swordswoman standing in front of an applauding crowd, and she coolly declares her blade isn't for chopping up puny weaklings. Then the young merchant Philnell strides up with a grin, praises her fierce performance, and offers her a drink on the house, telling her to order whatever she wants. Elena jumps in fast, her voice shaking as she insists she didn't forge the gorgeous kitchen knife the elf is studying, and in the blade's shiny surface, her reflection stares back while she holds her breath, silently asking who in the world could have made something that's sharp and perfect. Philno keeps talking and gushes over the blade, raving that it's a damn good knife she bought from a traveling merchant. Then her voice fades as she waves her hands around, like she suddenly realizes the elf's attention already wandered off. The elf swordswoman whips around and strides for the exit in silence. No more words, no hesitation. And as she slips out, the whole tavern erupts into whispers, calling her a dark elf swordswoman and chanting the name Belfair. Alone outside the town, Belfair, the purple lightning warrior, grinds to a stop, her face impossible to read as the world blurs behind her. The scene snaps into a rustic workshop. Haiji, dressed as a blacksmith, hammers away at a tiny anvil, while his cruel inner humanoid form swings a mallet and slams it onto glowing metal, and the clanging of their relentless work roars through the little smithy. A bright, young elf apprentice suddenly materializes in front of Haige, beaming with excitement as she holds up a massive, freshly forged knife. Then she fires off, "Tell me what you think," with eyes glittering like she can't wait for his verdict. She grips the edge of her breath as Hagi inspects the kitchen knife he forged, lifting it to the light and studying the blade's edge, face locked, lips moving with a quiet, "Let's see." After thinking it through, he calls it well made, and the elf apprentice rockets her arms up in victory, cheering like she's won the whole world, while AG quietly admits to himself that her fearless comfort with the forge's heat is seriously impressive, proof she's going to grow into a top-notch blacksmith. Right when the apprentice throws a celebration, Cruel crashes in, eyeing the young elf's tight, healthy muscle tone, then pivots to Haiji. She praises him, credits him as the master craftsman behind the apprentice's win, and even calls out how wild it looks seeing him hammer out a plain kitchen knife, leaving Haiji blushing and rattled. Hagi stays quiet, a blush surging up his face, and the elf apprentice scoots in with a grin that screams trouble as she asks what's got him turning red. So he clamps a hand over his mouth and insists he's fine, admitting he's never heard compliments like that before. She bursts into hearty laughter, and his awkward reaction somehow makes it even funnier. Then she playfully pats his head and thanks Cruel for handing them that perfect moment. Later, while Haji and Cruel were stuck at the table, Sue burst into the room, cat ears twitching, as she shouted that she de-cooked them something awesome. She swings out a huge platter stacked with rice balls. Cruel's eyes sparkles as she asks what's inside. Then Sue just leans in and tells her, "Now eat." Haiji takes a bite and her eyes instantly sparkle. She blurts out that it's boiled egg and the seasoning is straight up delicious. Haiji watches her reaction, then steals a bite himself, and boom, his face lights up with a pleasant surprise. He took a bite of the rice ball, and instantly his face twisted in shock from the brutally sour flavor, like, "What is this?" Sue flashed that wild fang grin and practically begged, "So did you like my wild strawberry?" He steadied himself fast, admitting the flavor was weird as hell and maybe not for everyone, but he personally loved it. Sue's eyes lit up, and she swore she'd cook up tons more for him to devour. After they tore through their meal, Haiji barked that it was back to work, and Kroll and Sue shot up with fists raised, screaming in perfect sync. Several days later, the forge rang like a war drum as Hagi and his elf apprentice pounded steel, hammer after hammer, in a steady, pounding rhythm. The apprentice stared at her freshly forged knife, then spun a Haji into a bold business plan. Why stop at knives when they could rake in swords too? He watched in silence, but his nod said it all. Her sword-making was seriously impressive. Right as his thoughts hit a wall, a bigger problem snapped his focus. Filma was late for her delivery, and he blurted it out. The apprentice jumped at the chance to go check. And the moment Sue popped up from behind the crate of finished blades, she beamed, bragging she'd helped forge 100 knives, then thanked Cruel like it was no small feat. He spun around, swallowed by deep thoughts, convinced that every blade forged in his workshop would fly off the shelf with zero trouble. So when the apprentice asked for his nod, he didn't hesitate, and once he heard him roar with confidence, she snapped into agreement with Sue chiming, echoing those same affirmations. Right then, a sliding door screeched open, snatching their attention, when a horse and cart rolled in, and Larsa, flustered and frantic, stood there bowing hard as she apologized for being late. She insists she didn't mean to come off unreasonable, she was just escorting someone who wanted to meet him. But Haiji, stunned, blurts out whether he's really the person they're looking for. While he reels from it all, the elf apprentice steps up, eyes locked on the stranger with Felnor beside her, and she snaps, demanding to know who this woman really is. The armored elf swordswoman stays ice calm though and tells the apprentice, "Don't pin this on the merchant." Then she steps forward and introduces herself as Fambian Belfair ***, but tells Haji to just call her ***Bell***. When he repeats the full name, he's clearly trying to catch it in the middle. The nickname hits and Cruel immediately mutters she hates her own name. It's not cute at all. While Sue, the young cat-eared girl, shakes in pure terror and clutches Haji's leg like a lifeline, begging him to shield her from all these strange people. But her fear only sparks Belfier's focus. Those swordwoman eyes flare bright as she blurts that she's never seen a white wolf child before. Then the affection hits like lightning, and she lunges in to scoop Sue up in a crushing, unbreakable hug, sweeping her away like, "I'm taking you home." Sue thrashes in panic, muffled cries punching the air, but Belfier grips her tight. Then the elf casually praises the girl's built strength for her tribe, and when Sue's fear spikes, the apprentice screams, telling Belfier to stop because she's clearly scaring the child. Hagi jumps into the plea, shouting at Belfier to let the girl go, stuck in that brutal hold, as Sue screams for Hagi to save her. With the apprentice and Sue visibly shaken, Haji strides in and snaps, "Stop." Belfier finally lets Sue go, mumbles an apology and admits she's got a soft spot for cute things, then her eyes whip straight to Haji. She claims Filmal told her how good he is with knives, and now she wants to take a look at the sword in his hands to judge how well it's been made. She raised the sword high and let her sharp eyes race along every inch. Then she muttered in a cutting voice that the blade's chasing just didn't measure up. He nodded along with her point and said the polishing was meant to stay a touch rough, because a real swordsman might feel that tiny snag when he slices through an arm, and that was the plan, not an accident like a blade built for professionals. She whipped out her own weapon and thrust the hilt toward him. "So, what do you think of this one?" she asked, daring him to inspect it. He snatched the sword from her, and the instant his hands closed on the hilt, click, his face exploded with pure, stunned disbelief. His companions stand back and watch, and the moment beads of sweat start popping on his brow, his whole body locks up tight. Two girls watched with dread growing by the second. Cruel waved her hand, demanding to know why Haji's face had gone totally pale, while Sue hovered in worry, asking if he was even okay. He shook like a leaf and couldn't meet a single eye. Head bowed so low he practically vanished, and he blurted out a sincere apology, admitting he was probably the one who forged this sword, and shattered it. Those words blew Belfier away. He could only choke out a question. Was Haji really confessing he didn't know what he was doing yet? And Haji, drowning in anguish, admitted it to himself. Yeah, his own immaturity had been burned into him by the fire. He stood there in silence while his companions stared on as Belfier inspected the fractured blade. She admitted it was flawed, but it was still a great sword, because for 3 whole years it survived monstrous foes, and she even warned him that no matter how legendary a blade is, it's bound to break someday. Her calm acceptance froze him in place for a second. He'd been convinced she was a monster for her insane strength and perfect composure, but then he snapped out of it and urged her to forgive his outburst. She just gave him a soft smile and told him, "No matter what happens, your swords are still good." That praise shot Fulnell into pure excitement, and she couldn't believe it. This was the kind of approval you only earn from the legendary Purple Lightning Spellfire. But Hagi froze, stunned and speechless, because he still couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that a warrior with that much fame had been using his own creation. His disbelief exploded, and right then the elf swordswoman snapped a direct question. Did he really not forge her sword? He just froze, wide-eyed, and could only blurt her name in stunned disbelief. She told him to quit acting shocked, because she'd been using his razor-sharp blades for ages, and once that was out of the way, she leaned in and laid out her request. As she spoke, she unveiled a pristine new sword. Right then she swore that across the whole Wurail kingdom, no swordsmith could match him. Even if she wasn't 100% sure, she felt the blade in her hands was the real deal, and the very first one to lay eyes on it wasn't some veteran. It was a brand new state-of-the-art model forged in the kingdom's forges. He blurted out in total disbelief, demanding she wasn't lying and begging to know if this was really the sword she claimed. But Belfair didn't flinch at all, just shrugged and said, "If you think so, then it has to be." He shoots his gaze away, cheeks burning, when the sword's legendary brilliance slams into his mind, and Belfair blurts that she always suspected this blade was the world-famous masterpiece from the Wurail kingdom. Haji grumbles under his breath, finally clocking that it was the same back then too. She cuts right through his thoughts and drives the sword toward his chest, eyes locked on him, saying this is exactly why she's asking. She wants him to forge a sword for her and only her. As she talks, one tear slips out of her left eye and races down her cheek, and her stare never breaks, pure, unshaken intensity. His eyes snap straight to the tear, and he jabs a finger toward it, his face tight with worry as he asks, "What's up with her, Raj?" She softly brushes the side of her face, and there it is, a prosthetic eye she got back when she was younger. He lets the truth sink in, and his face tightens as he says Japan never looked like this. This world is packed with beasts and demons, and you don't survive without fighting. He realizes if her blade snaps, she's probably going down with it, so he presses. Is that what you're trying to tell me? He tilts away just a bit, and his resolve hardens. He says it straight. He's not forging weapons to hurt people. And when Belphaya hears that, his face crumples with deep, heartbreaking sorrow. Her sadness snaps away into a bright, determined smile, and she blurts out that she wants a sword to protect him. Haiji freezes, then watches as she reaches her hand out. He thanks her on instinct, and with fresh resolve, he grips her armored hand tight, locking their promise in place. With his companions acting cruel, Su kept watch from the forge doorway as Haiji cinched a headband tight around his forehead. Haiji realizes a real Japanese sword won't be quick. It'll take at least 10 days to forge, far longer than a simple knife. Since he already sent Belphaya back to the city, he steels himself for the brutal stretch of work ahead. Eyes lock forward with razor-sharp focus, no doubt left in him. He's ready to kick things off. He points at a heap of jagged, dark metal and asks the master blacksmith what it is, and the craftsman lays it out. This is tamahagane, the specially refined steel. Then he explains that forging a knife with it demands 1500 to 1600 degrees, almost twice the heat most blades get, and Cruel and Su lean in, hooked by every word. This cruel girl puffs her chest and declares that high-temperature work is her specialty, then tells him he can leave it to her, so he doesn't want to miss out and eagerly jumps in to help clean. With their companions standing by, Haji drops to one knee at the anvil across from the master blacksmith, and together they slam the glowing metal, their perfectly timed hits flinging sparks everywhere in the workshop. Master blacksmith snatches up the cooled, lumpy mess from their first hammer strikes, calling it tamaroshi, then hurls the metal right back into the forge's brutal heat until it burns white-hot and ready for flak. It keeps pushing the process forward, telling you that the flattened steel has to be smashed into pieces, then the finest bits get picked out, piled up, and wrapped tight in paper. After that, the whole bundle gets dunked in a slurry of straw, ash, and clay water, then shoved right back into the furnace to heat all over again. They hammer the block of steel flat, fold it over, then slam it again and again, each round driving the impurities out, tighter and cleaner. Right after every fold, they dust it with straw ash and shove it straight back into the roaring fire. He wipes the sweat from his brow, the forge's brutal heat turning him into pure shine, and beside him, Cruel Mirrors throws a cold, focused grin as she readies for the next strike. She unleashes a powerful cry and slams the heavy sledgehammer down onto the glowing steel. She's got his grip holding still. Boom. The impact rolls through the workshop like thunder. He pauses, then drops those ruthless words. Crafting human weapons is pure hell to make. The blacksmith nods and agrees, saying Japanese swords are even tougher since you have to layer and forge the metal again and again, countless times. Her curiosity hit the ceiling watching his sheer dedication, so she spun to him and demanded to know why he was so dead set against forging a sword for Haiji before. He stares into the forge flames and flips the question back on her, asking if she's jealous he's the one forging the weapon. Cruel snaps the idea down fast, swearing she doesn't care one bit. While Kazuya's not around, Haiji's out training on his own, swinging a wooden sword, firing up his need to prove how strong he's gotten, until his eyes lock onto a rapier he once forged for Belphaya, and he can't resist the thought. He wants to find out what he can build with his own hands now. At the forge, the master blacksmith finally drops the real reason he's doing all this. He claims this forge holds a secret, mysterious power, and if they team up, they can forge a sword so incredible it'll blow your mind. His face ignites with a wild, manic grin, and he blurts out that this is the most fun he's ever had, his love for the craft snapping back to life like a raging fire, making every forging session feel like pure joy. He froze in stunned silence, because after all that sweat, the job was finally done, and the forge, quiet at last, showed off the finished blade like it was revealing a secret. Cruel and Su stood right beside him, wearing the same jaw-dropped disbelief. Right in front of them, sitting on that display stand, was the fruit of their hard work, and the moment hit them like thunder. It was finally done. That blade was pure artwork, polished steel flashing in the light like it was alive, so Cruel blurted, "This is unreal," and Su nodded hard, calling it beautiful. Her awe snapped into sharp, hands-on curiosity as Cruel pushed the idea that Haiji should try a test cut, and Su jumped in immediately, urging it on. He took their advice and slipped outside to find a perfect target, then planted himself in front of a thick tree, gripping the brand-new sword like it was about to bite, while Sausch yelled encouragement from a safe distance. He slashed with the blade, and bam, the truth hit him like lightning. It was impossibly light. Then a towering tree roared as it started to fall, and Cruel screamed his name in pure panic. The slash hit hard, and the weapon somehow felt way too light, so he went flying, crashing onto the grass. Then groaning with pain, he tried to pull himself up while Cruel and Su sprinted over, hovering and firing off panicked questions. He just kept staring at the new katana, and a bead of sweat slid down his temple as awe hit him. Because he finally understood, he'd forged a weapon that was straight up unbelievable. A few days later, the elf swordswoman Belfea showed up and greeted him and his crew with a knowing smile, then leaned in and told him she'd been waiting on him for ages. Sorry for the wait, Belfea didn't even sweat it. He just said his new work felt rock solid, and Haiji backed that up instantly, then invited her to watch it for herself right away. She slipped in right after him, and there it was, the katana sitting on a display stand. When Belfea raised it, she froze, eyes snapping wide at the exact power she could feel. Filnal Larsa jumped at the reaction, snapping that without a real appraisal, its rank was anyone's guess. Yet Belfea couldn't stop himself, blurting that it had to be top tier, maybe even S rank. She braced the blade in her hands, tightening her grip until it stopped trembling, and she realized, way too late, that it was heavier than she ever imagined. As she whipped her practice swing, the blade suddenly felt way too light, like it might vanish in her hands, and that scared her a little. Then a bright smile snapped onto her face as she turned to Hagi, asking if he wanted to watch a test cut. He didn't hesitate for a second, he jumped right on it. Belfea planted herself in front of a stack of iron ingots as thick as a person's torso, and Haiji stared, thinking there's no way a slice like that should be possible, until her skill, his blade, and one sharp exhale kick off the swing. They snapped the blade downward in one sharp, spotless arc, driving it straight for the stacked blocks of solid iron ingots. The katana sliced through the metal like it was nothing, and with one effortless swing, it split the entire stack clean in two. The impossible feats. It left Filmal and Sue completely stunned, both frozen with their mouths hanging open in pure disbelief. Haiji froze in pure shock, staring at the brutal power his own creation unleashed, and then Belfea spun toward him with a warm, real admiration in her voice, praising his incredible skill. Her cheeks stayed dusted with a soft blush as she swore the sword was really his power made real. Then Belfea admitted she'd been holding back in their duel, and the truth hit her hard. If he'd fought for real, he could have cut her down. With a deep, respectful bow, she thanked him like it mattered, and Haiji, still stunned by her words and the sword's performance, could only choke down a hard, trembling reply. While I watched the back and forth, the master blacksmith snapped in his voice thick with pride, and said, "Sure, every sword eventually breaks, but I won't take your payment." Then he pointed out it all started with the blade's failure, his failure. She demanded Belfea hand the money back, but Filnel cut in, reminding the swordswoman of her own rule, never walk away from a job. Belfea took that to heart, then reconsidered everything and threw out a fresh deal. The materials for 30 gold coins. She snatches the offered payment away and snaps that it's way too low, down to even the simplest royal palace goods, which she says cost 100 gold coins. With a cold, steady stare, she demands what price he thinks his work is worth. Haiji grips the gleaming katana and answers bluntly, he only priced the materials. His casual shrug at his own work floors her on the spot. She blurts out that she can't believe he's trying to get paid by her, like, for real. And when he sees her face twist, he leans in and asks if she's mad at him. She refuses to answer, stone-cold, unreadable eyes, and then he steps up with a straight-faced, no-jokes request. He demands Belfea teach him the sword's true art. His request steers them into a wide-open field, where Cruel and Sue are already waiting, and when he explains he's handed the Kaguchi blade to Belfea, his reason hits hard. He's determined to grow strong enough to protect his family. He keeps going, convinced that surviving and leveling up in that forest means he can master swordsmanship too. And as he talks, Belfea slips a little farther away from the group. She whips around to face him with a sly little smile and challenges him to a mock battle, and that lands like a surprise punch to Hagi. When he hesitates, Belfea nods like she's read him perfectly and pushes, "Then let's start right now," even as Hagi sputters that he's totally brand new at this. Her face hardens again, and she admits this. Good form matters, but you only truly understand it when you've survived a real fight. She plants herself in a ready stance with the katana, tells him it's okay, because he can't unleash his full power right from the start. Then Haiji lets out a long breath and accepts the sudden lesson. A faint, knowing smile tugged at her lips as she looked at him. Then her voice dropped low and steady as she started. With the stage set in a wide grassy clearing beside a plain building, a training session is about to kick off. Haiji faces off against the elf swordswoman Belfea, while Cruel stares them down and Sue and Film hang back at a safe distance to watch. All three of them brace for what's next. Belfea steadies her sword like she's done 100 battles, Hagi tightens his grip with raw resolve, and Cruel just holds perfectly still, eyes sharp and ready. On the sidelines, their cheers crackle through the air. Sue winks bright, Filnal smiles steady, and both lift their fists and shout for Hagi to give it everything. Right in the middle of the clearing, Belfea flashes him a smug, confident smirk, while Haiji's jaw tightens and a bead of sweat springs to his brow as he grips his sword even harder. She shatters the silence and fires off a question. Does he want to be the attacker or the defender? Eiji looks completely lost at first, but she won't stop. She reads his reactions and claims it's the defender role he's leaning toward. When she says it, his face snaps into surprise. She's about to take it back, but she shrugs it off and says his body just moved on its own. So she's cool with it, and now she's ready to unleash her attack. His eyes go wide as she rockets forward. Steel sings as Hagi snaps into defense, parrying a brutal strike the moment it lands. Sheer force slams into his guard, and a murderous aura chills his skin as he wonders if his hero's growth skill is the only reason he can react at all. Even with all that pressure bearing down on him, Belfier says he's starting to get the hang of the speed. Just like that, then she flashes a sly grin and pushes, "Let's go even faster." Aegis' expression snaps into pure panic as he sputters, begs her to stop, and begs for them to wait. The blow slammed him hard, and he clung to his sword with white-knuckled grip, because her speed and weight were on a whole other level. Then Belfier's voice cut up from below, praising him for holding out and taking the hit. Even with everything stacked against him, she dug in and took her shot, eyes razor-sharp, refusing to blink, pushing forward and daring him to keep going because he could still make it. That crushing force slammed into him, and a grimace twisted his face, because if it kept coming, they'd shove him back and carve him down before he could even make a move. He knew he couldn't last, so his eyes snapped around for a crack in her guard. He had to read her movements, then strike the moment it opened, shifting his focus from her right knee to the left, readying his next move. Sensing his opening, he exploded forward with a silent roar, sweeping her clean off balance as he tackled her hard around the waist. That successful tackle didn't even rattle her. Her face stayed calm as she stared down at him, saying, "On a battlefield, just dropping your opponent isn't how you end the fight." In a blink, everything flipped. He was suddenly on the ground, her dagger's cold edge biting his throat, and he shouted, "Stop." He threw in the towel, and Velfia leaned in, admitting his surrender before praising how cleanly he moved right up to the tackle. Hagi blinked in pure confusion as they faced it again, then admitted he'd really thought that when she shoved him down, she'd show zero mercy, like maybe all dark elves were built that way, until Belfier flashed a gentle smile and told him straight up that couldn't be farther from the truth. He screams in pure frustration, flings his hands up, and collapses on the ground, utterly defeated. From the sidelines, Sue and Cruel can't stop staring. Sue gushes that Haiji is a sword slinger and looks insanely cool, and Cruel cheers right along, while Philinor quietly thinks, he's just copying Belfier's moves. Cruel words hit her ears, but she still grins at the wild sight, though she can't spot the final move. As Haiji shoves himself up to stand, Belfier whirls around and asks if he finally understands that it's time to cross swords. Now stripped of his armor, Haiji just stands there, eyes empty, sweat pouring down his face as the crushing loss hits him all at once. Cruel cuts in and tells him, straight up, she's been convinced from day one that he's stronger than he thinks, and that normal people don't even stand a chance against her, a holy dragon. Belfier cuts in and snaps that Delita's dragon-level aura is so brutal it smashes a normal person before they can even get close. Then she says it straight. Haiji's power is nearly on par with an A-rank swordsman. The assessment crushes him, he can't even speak. He stares at his own hand, heart racing, wondering if he can really be a rank. She keeps going, saying the truth is right in front of him. He's the one choking off his own potential, not some outside force. With a sheathed sword held out, she dares him to try believing in himself. Heiji just freezes, staring at the blade as her words slam into his mind. He stared back at his past, before all this, when he was just a regular salaryman in modern Japan, dragged into this world as a decorative hero, and all along he figured his power didn't matter, just following orders without a single question. But when he stood there, Cruel Philnell, and Sue watched him with soft, gentle smiles, and Cruel quickly cut in, swearing his self-check was completely wrong. With his resolve hardening, he tightened his grip on the sword at his side and swore, through Belfier, that he'd believe in himself just a little more. Belfier shot back that it wasn't about trying at all. Then she flipped the conversation, leaned in, and asked what the name of the blade in his hands was, insisting he should trust himself and swing such a masterpiece. He jabbed a finger at the sky and said with rock-solid certainty that he'd already chosen a name. Belfier stared at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. He named the blade *Suckyu*, Azure Sky ***, because it promised endless power, stretching wide like the very sky, and Belfier grinned at the spot-on choice, fully approving his new sword's name. His gaze snapped to Belfier, and he blurted that her blue eyes looked just like the sky that day, and that random compliment totally blindsided her. Her own eyes went wide. Her whole body started trembling, embarrassment crashing down on her as she blurted out that she couldn't stand it anymore, and Haiji just stared, totally lost, trying to figure out what was wrong. Crushed by emotion, she lunged into Haiji's arms, shoved his face into her chest, and blurted that he was insanely cool, while Haiji, totally blindsided, couldn't even process what was going on. He gapes in disbelief, wondering if she's messing with him, but she leans in and shouts that he's exactly what she wants, cool, kind, and insanely strong, and then admits she's been hunting for someone just like him for ages. Heat rushed to her cheeks, and her breath came in fast bursts as she stared him down. Then she blurted out, asking if he'd be her partner. Just as everything hits a breaking point, Cruel lunges in and yanks Haiji away from the elf, hard. Then she snaps that Belphegor needs to give him back, furious, because Haiji is her master. An intense rivalry snaps to life between them. Belphegor and Cruel lock eyes, and the air turns razor-thin with tension, crackling like electricity. As the two square off, Sue lunges in and blasts Cruel as a sly cheat, and Belphegor just shrugs calmly, saying if Sue's right, then she's Haji's sword master, until Cruel snaps back that she's not a master at all, she's Haji's partner. As the argument spirals out of control, Fillmore whips around to the stunned Haji and blurts that things have gotten wild way too fast. Haji can only gawk, utterly crushed by how quickly everything exploded. As their bickering snaps through the air, he jerks his gaze to the sky and can't help thinking, what the hell happened to his life? Now that the rivalry was out in the open, Belphegor's exit was basically unstoppable. She waved from her shaking carriage, flashed a confident grin, and promised she'd look after the soak she'd gotten. He and the scowling, cruel guy and the cheerful Sue all shot their hands up and waved back at her as she kicked off her journey. As they watched her walk away, Haiji said Belphegor sounded like a decent person. Then Sue shot him a sharp look and asked straight up if he was into women like her, and Cruelty hit him with an icy sideways glare. His face went hot, sweat poured down his brow, and his words tangled as he stammered, unable to deny it in any clear way. He was completely crushed by it all, so he spun around and bolted out of that awkward mess. Cruel ripped into him from behind, yelling that he was running away, while Sue shouted for him to stop. Meanwhile, in a nearby town, a young swordswoman in gleaming armor sat alone at her table, staring off with a heavy, pensive look. Just when she thought she'd be left in peace, Belphegor stormed in and snapped at her for being late, and the swordswoman, who Belphegor called Master Belphibia, started to panic, insisting Belphegor was the one in charge. Belphegor waved it away and reminded her that she'd been told 1,000 times to call him Bel, then told her to drop the stiff formality. She pushed the issue, demanding answers. Why was Belphibia clinging to stubbornness when everyone back in her hometown had been won over so easily? That question yanked Belphibia completely off balance, because when she heard hometown, she had no clue what Belphegor meant. She freezes at the wild question, but Belphegor just shakes her head and waves her master off. No time for that. Then Belphibia pivots, demanding to know if she finally tracked down the sword she's been hunting. Belphegor then pulls out a sword in its sheath, with that unmistakable square guard, and admits, yeah, that's what I found. She drops a quick apology like it's her fault the blade went missing, but Belphegor shuts it down, saying it's on both of them since she never managed to find what she was hunting either. Belphibia can't miss it, her students are way too playful, and Belphegor, she's clearly glowing with good mood. With a cheerful giggle, Belphegor spills that she just met someone interesting, leaving Belphibia staring at her apprentices like, okay, so what happened to you all? She hums quietly as Belphegor's words sink in, then her mind snaps back to that earlier chat, where Belphegor called the fighter unrefined, like a total amateur. Yet somehow, that mess still hits with real impact. Belphibia's daydream gets smashed by Belphegor's teasing voice, telling her to stop locking onto people she's clearly fascinated by, or watching them trade looks with each other. Heat floods her cheeks as he presses on, saying it's fine if she's curious, but he can't stop worrying. Then a voice nearby blurts in shock, asking if she really went and did it. Indu Kane's voice carries as she tells Belphegor, this is a perfect match, now it's time for night training, and the two start walking off. Then Belphegor suddenly calls back, begging his master to wait, and when they're gone, a blush creeps over Belphibia's face as she realizes she's nothing like Kane. Just as evening slips in, one lone star ignites in the twilight sky, blazing brighter by the second. With a bright, radiant grin, Cruel practically beams at Haiji and shouts that she's uncovered a weird-looking tree. Paul barrels into the workshop. There's Haji, hammer in hand, who freezes mid-swing as Sue stands right beside him, staring. She and the others gathered at the spot, eyeing those tall, segmented stalks like pure monsters, and she spat out cruel remarks like, I've never seen a plant like this before, her curiosity exploding the moment she laid eyes on it. Hagi slips in with them, raises a stalk, and calls it bamboo. Then he goes on that it grows all the time in his world, and you can practically hear the cruel one's confusion crack. He stares at the bamboo, and a wild idea hits him. He knows hero summoning is ancient magic, so he wonders if seeds from this plant somehow got stuck to a previous hero's clothes, got tossed into this world, and finally sprouted. With that spark in his head, he whips around and tells everyone his plan, using bamboo to forge fishing rods, only for Cruel and Sue to stare back in stunned silence as Cruel cuts in. Fishing. The tension evaporates and pure thrill bursts through the room. Cruel can't wait, shouting that she's dying to try, while Sue rockets her hand up and yells she wants in too. With their excitement blazing, Haiji leans in and asks if they're ready to go fishing. Then there's another stop. a calm river, crystal clear water gliding over smooth stones, shaded by thick green trees beneath a blazing blue sky. With fishing rods in hand, the whole gang bursts onto the river bank, buzzing with excitement. Cruel and Su-chan especially can't stop gassing about the fishing trip, and all three of them are rocking brand new summer clothes Phil handed them. He starts prepping the gear, proudly announcing the setup is finally ready, and Cruel and Su hang on his every word from the shallows while he readies their lines. Unfurls the bait, and their eyes light up instantly, because this is cruel genius they're thrilled to use to haul in fish after fish, while Su stare is wide-eyed, already picturing the catch in their head. Their lines were cast, and the bobber drifted peacefully on the glassy water as the crew finally settled into their quiet fishing mode. Time drags by with zero action. Cruel yawns wide, and Su gripes that they haven't snagged a single thing. Then Cruel snaps that it's all that thing's fault, leaving Haji clueless like, what thing? She says something huge is hiding under the water's skin, and it's terrifying every other fish into silence. Then, deep down, a shadowy shape surfaces with two blazing glowing eyes, proving she's right. With her patience running on empty, she snaps, I'll take it from here, and a bow of raw energy ignites in her hands. Then the next second, the river detonates into a roaring wall of water. She stands tall in the pounding rain, bow still in hand, and yells, how was that? Behind her, soaked to the bone, Haji and Su sit on the riverbank, utterly stunned and completely speechless. In the blast's wake, a huge scaled creature lies dead on the river like it's been peeled clean, and Haji stares in shock, then can't believe how fast the whole thing happened. As soon as they come into view, vicious splashes blast from the water, soaked and stinging everyone on the spot, while Su, glaring under the surface, realizes one wrong move. If she gets too worked up and shifts, they'll spot her. He gently pats the crying Cruelty on the head, murmuring that he thinks the river creature is the master, so she shouldn't fear. She only came to fish and couldn't have known it was a trap. Su watches them with a worried look, then whispers his name. Her face tightens with raw determination. She clenches her fists, declares she'll catch that creature, and pushes for a fishing rod strong enough to handle the job. After she delivers that fire in her voice plea, the whole group rushes straight to the master blacksmith's workshop. He hears their plea, then tells Kroll straight up that making something like that would be a nightmare without the right materials. He even muses that soft iron could work, but it's nowhere near ideal, and Kroll leans in, taking every word like she fully gets the problem. His words slam into Haji like a light bulb. His eyes go wide as he quietly shoots down the claim that they're missing what they need. He clings to every lesson he's ever lived, bracing for the day he can finally forge something real, remembering the sword Belfayer hammered for him, and how he once pushed to craft soft iron himself. Now a brand new purpose burns into place. He tightens his fist, eyes locked on the truth. It might just work, so he's going to try. He gently patted Kuro on the head, and she winked at him, praising his smart advice and pressing him to tell her if he'd finally figured something out. Plans locked in, he launched into the job, and the ambulance started spitting sparks like a warning from fate. Cruel slammed a heavy sledgehammer down with brutal force, while he, now in an apron and headband, focused on the delicate details like he had no mercy to spare. As he threw himself into the work, his focus snapped into place, and a memory ripped open from his days in the royal palace. They'd told him the real power of a blacksmith wasn't magic at all. It was something far more vital. He remembered his hooded instructor leaning in and saying, sure, talent and knowledge matter, but there's one thing you can't ever drop, the most important truth about magic. The lesson was all about picturing the outcome you want so vividly it starts to feel real. Then, right there in the present, sweat dripped down his brow as the answer hit him like lightning. He clenched the metal tight, forced his will into it, and made it turn soft iron. His sharp focus paid off. Right outside the workshop, he hauled back and blasted a newly forged fishing rod into the air, and the thing snapped through the sky with flawless, springy strength while Cruel and Su watched, jaws dropping. Every single one of their eyes blew wide at the same time, glittering with pure shock and unstoppable joy at finally seeing the finished masterpiece. She erupted in pure joy, throwing her arms wide as she shouted about how the rod bent and swayed, and right beside her, Cruel stared in shock, amazed that this iron thing flexed like bamboo. Her shock cracked into action. She snapped that what they needed right now was a fishing line, and then she flashed an idea on how to get it. She plucked one shimmering strand of her own hair and thrust it toward Haiji, like, here, use this. And when he studied the rod, he nodded fast, convinced her hair would slot in perfectly. With the line finally secured, Cruel shot back with full confidence. Now they could track down the master of the river. Revenge time. Their gaze snapped to the river, then the water's surface started to ripple, because something huge was sliding underneath. Just a heartbeat later, the shadowy, scaled back of a monstrous fish broke the surface, and from the bank, people erupted in cheers. They'd finally found their target. The creature was absolutely massive. Its hulking, power-packed body tore through the water with pure intent. He planted his feet, snapped the rod forward, and sent the line flying with one sharp flick of his wrist. He swore the bait had turned alive, then it slapped into the river, sparking tiny ripples that raced across the water. Then he started winding the reel on his fishing rod, and under the surface, right beneath him, small fish cruised on, completely clueless as the lure sank slowly from above. On the riverbank, Kroll and Sue watched in awe. Kroll practically yelled that the bait was wriggling like it was alive, and Sue snapped that it looked exactly like a real fish. From the dark depths, a gigantic shadow surged up. Then a whiskered mouth snapped wide and swallowed the bait in one brutal gulp, blasting a savage shockwave straight up the line that the summoned man felt instantly. The rod buckled hard as that massive force yanked him forward, water exploding and churning around them. Haiji stared in disbelief, finally seeing how terrifying their quarry really was. The summoned man clenched his jaw, impressed and relieved at the insane pull. Somehow, the rod was still holding. He dug in hard, heels biting the soft earth, fighting the creature's relentless pull as his body screamed for balance. Then the ground buckled, and he realized he was being dragged, not just pulled. Even though he was fighting for his life, he still got yanked forward at breakneck speed, right as he was about to be dragged off his feet. Kroll and Sue slammed into him, grabbing his back and arms to lock him in place. Raised up by his companions, he burst out for Kroll and Sue to come help, and he screamed for Dorita by name too. Then he shot a shout over at the stunned Haiji, promising him a delicious reward later if he could just stay patient. He roars as the line snaps tight, and that strange, segmented lure thrashes through the air. Then he realizes he can't muscle it alone, so he yells for everyone to help him haul. Sue and Kroll waste no time, grabbing on and throwing their strength behind him. With one furious shout, they heave with everything they've got, and the river's surface detonates into a roaring wall of spray. A river master rips out of the deep, an absolutely monstrous catfish. The blast of its burst slams the trio backward, but they somehow cling on. And now the summoned man and Sue just stand there, staring in pure, stunned horror at the giant thing they hooked. He crashes to the ground, then snaps up and demands if his friends are okay, while Kroll rubs her aching head, grumbles about the hit, and assures everyone she's fine, as is Sue. Their eyes snap back to that monstrous fish stranded on the shore. Kroll gapes at its insane size, while Summonman scans the area and demands to know where Hagi went. From across the chaos, Haiji watches it unfold and tells someone nearby, quiet but pumped, that they actually nailed it, not by luck, but because it was their own power that sealed the win. On the riverbank again, the crew jumps straight into action. Big leaf wraps tossed over a fire pit to tame the giant catfish, and as Sue and Kroll hum along, Sue lets out a bright, cheerful cry. Their meal's ready. The giant fish comes out perfectly roasted, and Kroll practically gloats as she declares the river's master has been cooked whole. Then both she and Sue gaze stare in awe at their incredible feast, eyes shining like they can't wait for what's next. She throws her head back and laughs as she takes a huge bite of the cooked fish, and the cat-eared girl beside her chews with her cheeks puffed out, her words coming out muffled behind the food. Nearby, the summoned man leans in and warns her not to miss any bones. With a bright grin, she shouts to Haiji, thanking him and calling the meal delicious. Then he pulls away from the group, takes a bite of his share, and thinks to himself that eating the fish they all caught together is basically the dream of a slow, peaceful life, something he never once expected in this other world. She wears a look of pure bliss, eyes shut, savoring every bite as she devours another giant mouthful of hot, freshly cooked fish, totally wrapped up in the simple joy of eating. Under a patchwork of clouds, a brutal wave of power presses in, dense and relentless. As they hike through the woods, Haiji spots Hiji warning him not to sprint too hard. She's worried she'll trip and go down. Still, with a bright, carefree grin, she insists she'll be fine. Confidence evaporates the moment she suddenly stumbles and lurches forward. Haiji blurts her name in panic. He bursts to her side, slaps a hand on her head and blurts out, panicked, "Are you okay? Does anything hurt?" From the dirt, she insists she's perfectly fine. She springs upright, points like she's struck gold, and yells his name. Then he freezes in shock when he realizes she's snagged a batch of mushrooms. There are two kinds of mushrooms here. One is a ghostly pale yellow, named because it looks just like an egg yolk, and the other is dark, almost black, and it tricks your eyes by looking way too much like a deadly poisonous one. Sue proudly flashes one of each, calling out Tamagoro Dake and Dokumadoki Dake perfectly. Then Haiji whips his head side to side, utterly baffled, because he can't tell the difference at all. He lets out a small, faint smile, because for a white wolf tribe kid like Sue, you'd spot it the second you hear Sen talk. And right when he's lost in the thought, she calls his name again. While everyone else scrounged for food, Kroll shot out a savage triumph cry, proudly revealing the gigantic mushroom she'd hauled in all on her own. She lifted it for everyone to stare at, jaws dropping at how huge it was, and then she blurted out, half spooked, what kind of mushroom could grow that big maybe even a demon beast in disguise? Right before anyone could even speak, a vicious shriek tore through the air, and a showhound's warning, and Haiji snapped his head around just in time to see two massive, wolf-like monsters with dark manes slink out of the trees, snarling at him. The hounds exploded forward with zero hesitation, a streak of dark fur and razor claws smashing straight into the small group. But just as the beast lunged for them, 3 white wolf tribe fighters barreled in and cut the attack off mid-surge. When Sue saw them, relief hit her hard. She blurted their identities, cried out for her mom and dad, and practically grabbed Hope with both hands. Her parents barreled in and crushed her in a tight embrace, and Haiji just stared in shock at their sudden arrival. Then he blurted out how they even knew to show up, only for Sue's mother to confirm she was okay. He snapped his gaze to her parents, face set and serious, then dropped the news that the White Wolf tribe was getting hammered too, because the Ishu hounds were suddenly rampaging again. Surya, Sue's mother, wore panic, while her father, Igol, grimly nodded along. Haiji nearly choked from shock, blurting out whether those beasts were really that strong. They all admitted they're dangerous, but this pack leader is a real nightmare. During a recent night raid, he seriously injured several of his own companions. While they talked, Cruel held Sue and stared at her, thinking that if this was a dragon, she'd beat it. Yet battling in the forest would put them at a brutal disadvantage. Haiji's face tightens the moment he remembers that multi-tailed Ashuhound leader. His eyes flash with grim certainty as he finally clocks exactly who their enemy is. As he takes it all in, Sue's parents lay the threat bare. Surya, eyes full of worry, says the creatures have been raiding their food and supplies, and Igol chimes in with a grim bite. The hound's claws and fangs are razor-sharp. It strikes with terrifying speed, and worst of all, it's moving like a coordinated pack now. He leans down towards Sue, and she looks up at him with shining, hopeful eyes. Then resolve hardens in his chest as he clenches his fist and vows in his head that he owes a debt to this very hound, and he's going to help. Igol blurts out, shocked by the offer no one even said out loud, and asks if he's really sure. Then Haiji locks eyes with him and vows he means it, pitching the idea that he can forge defensive gear for them. With Cruel and Sue flanking him, he strides up and speaks to the tribe in a formal voice, telling them the forest's suffering is theirs now, too, and he offers his help with a humble heart, praying he can be of real use. Relief and pure joy hit the faces of Igol, Surya, and the rest of the White Wolf tribe in one rush. Every set of ears snapped upright together as they poured out heartfelt gratitude, trusting their hopes would reach him. Later, Igol shows the whole tribe what they're really up against. Strap-heavy plate armor clanking as he argues that the White Wolf's strength lives in mobility. Then he slams a gauntlet down to drive the point home. They don't want gear that bogs them down. Inside the forge, Haiji, now in a work apron, studies the gauntlet like it's a puzzle, and he fully signs off on Gaul's judgment. He tells him he stumbled on this set while cleaning the workshop, then grins. Sure, regular armor is built like a tank, heavy and tough, but he's about to craft something else, something lighter, sharper, and totally different. He kicked things off by unveiling a drawing die, this specialized metal bending tool that crushes and reshapes stubborn metal rods through pure plastic deformation. He clutched the device tight and told everyone what it was for. Then Sue, staring at it, swore it was just gambling dice. Haiji gave her a soft correction, said it was something totally different, and urged her to watch the whole process unfold. To get the machine roaring, Cruel practically lunged forward with zero hesitation. Haiji thrust the end of a metal rod into her hands and told her to yank with everything she had. Cruel flashed a confident grin and grabbed on. She snapped into action, muscles bunching as she hauled with brutal strength, while Hagi wrestled a lever to hold the whole apparatus steady. With her insane strength, Sue yanked the thick iron rod through the die like it was nothing. The metal slid cleanly, even as its thickness changed right before their eyes, and Haiji immediately clocked that they'd keep doing it again and again through smaller and smaller holes. He stared at the result, an impossibly delicate bundle of metal wires, so thin they looked like thread, and Sue couldn't help but marvel at the transformation. Haiji explained it was a metalworking technique called drawing. Now that the raw materials were finally in hand, Haiji swung his attention to Sue's parents, Egil and Surya, and told them straight up. The next step would need the White Wolf tribe, so they had to round everyone up as fast as they possibly could. Right after he asked, the whole tribe packed in and sprawled around a giant mat, Haiji, Cruel, and Sue included. Then they dove into the hard, detailed work of weaving those brand new metal wires together. He fires off instructions to the tribe. Cinch the iron wire tight around a metal rod, then slice that coil into separate rings. With Cruel's orders, the whole White Wolf tribe sprang into action, snipping coils left and right, until a towering pile of tiny metal rings started to grow. Sue beams with pride and thrusts a huge handful of finished rings into the spotlight, laughing that she made so many, her little hands overflowing with the sweet payoff of all her hard work. Her mother, Surya, beams at Sue with a soft, loving look and praises her for going all in because she wants to be helpful to everyone. Haiji leans in and asks if she's actually having fun, and Sue lights up instantly, saying yes with pure excitement. He flashes a warm smile, gently pats her head, and murmurs that he understands. Then watching this whole side of the tribe band together with that kind of fire hits straight in the heart. After weeks of non-stop grind, the project finally bursts through the finish line, complete at last. Egil stares at the finished piece, a shirt woven from linked metal rings, and Haiji instantly calls it chainmail. The moment Egil lays eyes on it, his amazement explodes. It's shockingly light, and it lets him move so much easier than plate armor. He tells them that with this armor, the White Wolf tribe's speed won't get crushed. And yeah, it's a basic shield, but it should still shrug off the Asherhound's strikes. Then he leans in and pushes them. Don't just trust it, test it. He stood in front of the wooden dummy, now wearing that prototype chainmail, and Surya beside him stared with bared tension, demanding to know if he was really ready for her to unleash her full power. With a flash of speed, she shot forward like a streak and slammed a crushing chop down. Egil, her husband, instantly threw his arms up to shield his face, because he couldn't bear to watch it hit. The strike landed with a brutal crack, and Haiji, Sue and Cruel just stared, mouths open. Egil slowly dropped his hand, eyes stretched wide in pure disbelief, because that thick log on the dummy got split clean in half, yet the chainmail under it stayed flawless. Then Surya blurted out her shocked that the armor ate her full force hit and didn't even flinch. His doubts evaporated. Egil spun toward Hagi, eyes blazing, praising the armor as the key that would let them finally clash with the Asu hounds, and though Hagi cheered along, he warned that they still had to forge enough armor for the whole tribe to take on the packs. Haiji seized the moment, fired up the crowd and yelled, "Start production, now." And the whole White Wolf tribe, plus Cruel and Sue, shot their fists into the air and roared back as one, unshaken and ready. With morale blasting sky high, the whole tribe plunged into work. Haiji hammered an anvil, forging metal rings as Cruel drove him to keep going, while other groups huddled together, stitching armor together piece by painstaking piece. The work kept roaring on. Surya sat shoulder to shoulder with the other warriors, weaving the rings together with razor-sharp hands, and even young Sue jumped in, her small fingers clicking the metal loops into place as pure focus blazed in her eyes. Piece by piece, the chain mail started piling up, each link proof that their hard work was finally paying off, and hope was bursting back in. With the mass production finally done, the White Wolf warriors form up in one place, and each one wears newly forged chainmail that snaps with protection. Egil, their leader, calls them in and checks, one by one, that everyone's ready, and the tribe erupts in a single, thunderous cry of yes. Then he whips around to Haiji and bows hard, thanking him with real respect. Egil even throws in an apology for the trouble, insisting Haiji doesn't need to worry anymore since it's for their tribe to handle. But Haiji's got other plans. He cranes his neck, sword propped on his shoulder, and announces he'll go with them, then asks, straight up, to borrow one of their hounds for the hunt. Egil freezes, stunned that Haiji plans to step into the fight himself. Before the talk can go any further, Cruel strides forward and declares, full stop, she's going too. As a resident of Doldia, she can't just stand back and let everyone else risk their lives. Her declaration ignites something in Yongsu. He blurts out immediately that he'll go with her, and Haiji freezes, staring down at the little girl, shocked by how sudden and fierce her resolve is. She's hit with instant protests from her parents. Surya snaps that it's too dangerous and tells her to wait like a good girl, but Sue erupts, yelling that she's part of the White Wolf tribe and won't stand down while everyone else fights. Haiji just watches the heated family clash, sweat beading on his temple. Egil whips around to face her, his eyes dead serious, and asks if she's really got the guts to risk her life in battle, when Sulak stands her ground, turns that same resolve on full blast, and says she'll do it because she wants to help everyone. Their eyes snap into a silent, brutal standoff. Sue's stare burns with iron determination, and her father's expression carries the crushing weight of her demand. She whispers Haiji's name, calm as a still pond, and closes her eyes with a soft, knowing smile. Her dad, Egil, snapped with rage and slammed down a hard no on the whole idea, but Haiji stood his ground beside Cruel and Sue, calm as a knife, telling Egil he got the worry, and that he and Cruel would keep her safe. With her choice made crystal clear, she whirls around and strides off, leaving her mother and another tribe member staring as they watch her decide to leave. Just a short time later, Egil steps right in front of the entire White Wolf tribe, points at the three behind him, and declares that Sue is with him, plus Haiji and Cruel are now family too. Surya says that with these new members, their pack is finally complete, and then Egil steps in, his voice booming with command. He rallies the White Wolf tribe to shout with pride, fight with courage, and drive the Ashu hounds out of their forests. His words spark the entire tribe. One brutal roar crashes out as fists shoot into the sky, determination flooding every face, and right at the front, Egil stands tall and officially declares war. The hero, Sue, and that cruel bastard crowd the top of a jagged ridge, their silhouettes blazing against a wall of endless forest that sprawls beneath them. The whole party finally locks in, everybody's here. In the center stands the hero, boxed in by Gaul, Surya, and the rest of the White Wolf warriors, faces set with grim grit as they prepare to unleash the hunt. Igol, the tribe's leader, keeps a stone-faced, unshakable stare, while the hero beside him looks ruthless, both of them locked forward, fully aware they're not the only hunters stalking this territory. Just like that, his senses snap to attention. Egil declares she smells an ashohound. Not 2-1, she blurts, then the hero demands to know where it is. Cruel jabs a finger and says, over there, then freezes, corrects herself, and insists there are actually 2. He spots the weird discrepancies, lifts a tiny metallic tube to his eye, and extends it with a crisp click. Boom, it's a spyglass made to lock onto things miles away. He blurts out his shock, then demands to know if the hero can really spot anything from that far, because right through the lens, the hero catches sight of a lone dark-furred creature slipping between the trees and declares with total certainty, that's an ashuhao. He drops the device and his grin vanishes into a serious stare. Cruel keeps mocking him, saying his nose and ears are useless, but he snaps back that they're more than enough, so Sue leans in and peeks through the spyglass, and the hero fires off the order, track the hounds and find their leader. With their objective locked in, the whole crew moves like a single blade, boots pounding the dry earth and kicking up dust as they march off the ridge, dead set on their goal. They push deeper into the forest, and Igil suddenly declares the Asu hounds are close, like right there. He guesses it's a small pack, about 8 to 10. The hero's face tightens, and he demands the exact distance. He blurts the math out loud, muttering that the distance might be around 400 meters based on his 450 strides, then turns to Egil and asks if this little crew is the leader's pack. Paul breaks down how the hound packs are built. The pack they're hunting is just some minor, subordinate bunch, while a main leader calls the shots over smaller groups. Each of those leaders then runs even smaller units, until the whole thing clicks into a ruthless, layered hierarchy. He presses the advance, and then suddenly stops dead in his tracks, because a brand new, terrifying sin has just caught up to him. He snaps his head toward the hero, dread flooding his face, then blurts that he's caught the scent of the White Wolves, his own tribe, and fears they've already been taken, so he insists they have to rush to their aid right now. He's about to bolt when the hero stops him and tells him to wait. I'll push them to move right now, because he just revealed the truth. The pack they're hunting is bigger than anyone thought, like an actual army, and his crew has to be rescued fast. Sue blurts her father's name, her worry spilling out as she cries. Watching Egil bolt, the hero whips around to Sue and says, we're going after him, and she shoots back a determined, no-nonsense yes. He rockets through the trees at insane speed, and as the hero and Sue thunder after him, he's hit with awe at the White Wolf tribe's brutal athletic power. He can barely match their pace. He finally reached the source of that scent, an open mouth in the rock, staring into the dim light ahead. He blurted out a gar, and his breath jammed in his throat. He couldn't wrap his head around why anyone from the White Wolf tribe would be here. The sight that greeted them was pure doom. Inside the clearing, a pack of snarling Asho hounds had a bunch of captured White Wolf tribe members boxed in tight, huddled and helpless. Egil stood there, staring them down, his eyes narrowing as the truth hit him. It was a trap. His people had been baited here. The standoff explodes in an instant. Asho hounds snarl like beasts possessed, then tear forward from every angle, leaping toward a Gaul all at once. Chaos exploded. One of the hounds snapped out of the pack and lunged straight at the hero, jaws gaping wide. When the hero was suddenly in danger, cold fury snapped into Igil's face. He whirled around and launched himself to block the threat. He lunged like a streak of lightning, claws stretched wide, and one brutal slash carved straight through the hound's head, dropping it dead on the spot. With the danger shut down for good, that clearing erupted into a full-on war zone. Freed White Wolf tribe members surged in, claws blazing, and smashed right into the charging Asho hounds. In the chaos of fur and claws, the hero yanked Sue down hard, throwing his arm over her head as the brutal fight exploded all around them, while he could only stare helpless, as the Gaul and his tribe surged forward at blinding speed, ripping through enemy after enemy. He's wheezing with exhaustion, but he still pulls it off, driving back the last Asho hounds. Sue stands beside him, breathless with relief, and tells him they were saved because of his gauntlets. Later, the crew huddles up to dissect the attack, and Surya can't believe it. Hounds are turning stolen goods and pelts into bait. The hero admits that this move is far sneakier than he ever guessed. Then Egil explodes in pure fury. If they were going to pull something like this, they should have gone for a full, no-holds-barred assault, and he swears he won't let them off the hook. Sue barks that they're fully trapped, then flashes a bold grin and taps his temple, saying sure, they might be outmatched in some ways, but when it comes to thinking, humans never fold. Several days later, his plan kicks off for real. He strides beside the Gaul and the rest of the White Wolf tribe, cutting through the forest like they've got a mission burning in their blood. Their target, the Asho hounds' den, hidden in the trees while the whole pack sleeps soundly, totally clueless about the danger closing in. Just outside the den, he clenches his fist and hardens his face with pure resolve. Egil watches in silence, and in that quiet moment, the two leaders understand each other without a single word. With a thunderous shout, he slams the operation into motion, and the whole White Wolf tribe erupts as one, charging down the slope straight at the startled pack. The clash hits instantly, brutal and ruthless. He snaps his gauntlet up to stop a hound's lunge, and the next second the other warriors slam into the pack like a storm, claws and weapons shredding through the enemy ranks in seconds. He barrels straight toward one of the eschew hounds, bracing himself like it's about to go down. Then the thing curls its lips into a smile, and a jolt hits him as he realizes it's actually laughing. Something bigger is going on here, and it's not just a simple fight. A harsh echo rips through the forest, and Haiji instantly knows it's a cruel signal. He whips around to see her clutching her head, clearly breaking down, and Eggel's face hardens with grim realization the moment he understands. Surya roars for everyone to fall back exactly as planned, and the whole crew instantly pivots, then bolts out of the den, firing their strategy into motion. Eschew hounds tear into the chase, their paws pounding the forest floor as a distant hell flare screams that the hunt has started, and Eggel snaps a tense look over his shoulder. They tore into the clearing, right on cue, and Haiji's eyes snapped open because, just like they planned, ambush was already waiting. Igor stood there with Sue watching, and he nodded, confirming that everything was unfolding exactly the way Haiji had predicted. A trap snaps shut, wham, and one of the hounds yelps in pain as it gets caught, and the moment Haiji sees it, he barks, "Now, we move." With a single command, the earth bucks upward, jagged spikes slam out and pin several more charging eschew hounds in place, and Haiji bellows for everyone to attack while the enemy is still reeling. Meanwhile, Cruel, the one who used herself as bait, stands alone in the forest's deep shadows. Two eschew hounds halt mid-stalk right in front of her, and when she demands why they won't chase her, one snarling beast answers back. She whirls around at the two eschew hounds hot on her tail and laughs as she taunts them, beckoning them to chase her even deeper into the forest. Her taunts hit hard, those hounds explode in a rageful roar and surge straight at her, and the second that playful smile drops, panic floods her face as she realizes she has to run, right now. She rockets through the trees, and the beasts slam after her, thundering inches from her heels. As they thunder through the clearing, both hounds suddenly slam their claws into the dirt, skidding to a jarring stop. Their sudden halt makes her skid to a stop too, and she spins around, dread and confusion flashing across her face, because the hounds just freeze, standing far off and staring like they're waiting for something. Before she can even process what's happening, a blur rockets in from the side, and one of the hounds gets slammed hard into the ground. Turns out the attacker is Sue. She slams a massive weapon down with sheer, ferocious resolve. After she drops the beast, she whips her gaze to the dragon girl and shouts her name. She steps in beside Cruel, and he pats her head, praising her for nailing the decoy. And the last eschew hound just stares on, its partner already wiped out. She praised Haiji for nailing the eschew hound's trap, and Haiji only smiled back, correcting her, and saying it wasn't just the two of them running the whole scheme. His words hit dead on the moment their whole strategy spilled out, because every last remaining eschew hound was now boxed in inside that clearing, pinned between Haiji's crew and a brutal wall of White Wolf tribe warriors, just waiting to spring the trap. With the enemy trapped and their allies locked in place, Haiji's face turned stone cold, grim determination blazing in his eyes, because the era of defense was done. Now it was time to unleash the attack. They crowd back around the table as Haiji slams out a plan on a game board. One of them will play bait, luring the eschew hounds to a single spot so they can ambush them. Igel, Sue's father, calls it brilliant, but the whole room freezes on the same question. Who's taking the bait? Cruel voices worry about it, yet before anyone else can push in a choice, Sue practically leaps forward and volunteers without hesitation. She slaps Haiji's chest with wild confidence and swears she'll do it, only for Haiji to glance down at that little kid in doubt she's strong enough for the job, while Cruel in the back looks flustered by how fearless she just got. Sue shoots her hand up high, swearing she'll take the role, and Haiji tries to talk her out of it. He warns that being the decoy is insanely dangerous, while Cruel backs him up with the same cold truth. Still, Haiji stares down at her, torn between real worry and sheer frustration as her stubbornness refuses to quit. The playful sparkle just dies, rage-fueled resolve takes its place. With eyes locked tight, she declares she's part of the White Wolf tribe and swears she'll never be a burden to them. Eiji swallows hard, stunned by her sudden fire. Then he finally locks eyes with her and realizes her resolve isn't a joke, it's the real deal. After a beat, he gives in and just says, "All right." Sue's face explodes with pure joy. She launches forward and crushes Haiji in a tight hug, thanking him non-stop, while Cruel just stares, her head spinning in total disbelief. Then he shifts his focus to Cruel and demands she back up Sue, and when Cruel locks eyes with that determined girl, she nods, understanding hits, and she swears she'll protect Sue no matter what. Roles are locked in, and the support is secured. Then Haiji whips around to face Fasigal in Syria, with Sue still clinging to him like glue, begging her parents for the final go-ahead on their deadly plan. Sue's parents finally gave him the answer, and her mom, Surya, lit up with a warm smile, gushing about how proud she was of their daughter, while her dad, Igor, said he was deeply grateful that Hagi had come to ask for permission. Asagol softly caressed his wife's hair, while Surya stared at their daughter with warm love and told Sue, "We're counting on you." Haiji and Cruel watched that tender family scene unfold, because their plan was officially approved. On the decoy fields, the battle detonated across the plains. White wolf warriors collided head-on with the ravenous Ashu pack, claws and fangs flying in every direction. Haiji suddenly gasped in panic, because the pack leader finally stomped onto the battlefield, a giant that owned the air around it. From far off, Eagle's gaze locked onto the beast, and his face tightened with iron resolve. With a thunderous shout, he swore he'd never forgive the beast for what it did. Then Eagle unleashed a brutal, powerful sprint straight at the monstrous hound. Eagle's valiant charge got crushed by a brutal wall of force. He was swatted clean aside, slammed into a nearby tree with a sickening thud, and Sue and Surya screamed his name in pure horror. The hound leader slaughtered its enemy, then blasted raw energy straight from its mouth, while Haiji froze in shock, yelling that the beast had just swatted away one of Cruel's arrows. They huddled back together, locking eyes with that terrifying beast. Then Haiji felt it, unnatural strength, like it had been twisted into a mutant. He spun to the dragon girl beside him and demanded answers. What is this Cruel? Carol yells for her companion to hold up. Then she sizes up the beast and realizes, oh no, this thing is a freakishly powerful monster, and if it gets any worse, she'll have to bite the bullet and shift into her dragon form. He stays resolute, then cruelly snaps at him, demanding to know why he won't trust the power of his own strength. He snaps his eyes back to that brutal hound, like his choice is setting the rules, and he declares, I'll handle it. The beast dug in and refused to budge. Its killing intent was so thick it felt like you could reach out and grab it, prickling the air with pure terror. He rockets through the air, hitting the ground in a brutal dive. Then he snaps his head up, eyes blazing with panic as that monster comes crashing down on him. He tenses up for the hit, screaming at the top of his lungs. When the hound lets out, that raw maw just gapes wide open, and then he howls one single word like, I believe, with one brutal upward swing, his blade split the beast in two, blasting a hot spray of blood into the sky. The crowd, Igol, Surya, Sue, and even Cruel, just freezes, totally speechless, their faces locked in wild, jaw-dropping shock. The massive Ashu hound leader sprawls defeated, jaws hanging open in a last, breathless snarl. Then the tribe erupts in stunned cries across the clearing, because Lord Haji just pulled off the impossible and killed the beast. With their leader down, the remaining Ashu hounds crumble and lose the will to strike, and Egil, suddenly seeing his chance, bites back his attack, watches them fade into the distance, and decides to let them go. He knows that without their head, they're not a threat anymore, and Surya nods along, saying that in their sheer panic, they can't hurt anyone as. While the tribe grips the area and holds it, Haiji finally gives in to pure exhaustion, ragged breath tearing from his chest, a fresh cut blazing across his cheek. Cruel rushes over, yelling his name with worry as Haiji stumbles. For a split second, the exhaustion vanishes as Sue barrels toward him, her face glowing with raw admiration, praising his amazing strength, while her voice trembles with awe at his razor-cool composure in the middle of battle. He lets a small smile slip out. Later, once the sky clears, Cruel steps forward and thanks Haji and Sue from the bottom of her heart for their courage. Gratitude sparks a full-on turning point. Later, the whole group gathers in front of a village home, and then bam! The once monstrous Ashu hound leader is now shrunken to the size of a big wolf, calmly sitting right with them. With peace finally in hand, they throw a celebration. Egil lifts his tankard high and toasts the Ashu hound's defeat, then cheers for the bravery his daughter Sue just proved. His words spark instant agreement, and everyone thrusts their mugs up in the air, shouting together as one massive, thunderous cheer. The victory celebration explodes into full chaos. Women of the White Wolf tribe sing and dance, while the Cruel one, cheeks stuffed, gleefully tears into several huge bread rolls at the same time. AG jumps into the celebration, pouring drinks for the whole tribe, and then he just gapes. There's Sue, bouncing up on a barrel, serving her people with wild energy. He's surrounded by those three joyous tri-members, and he bursts into a big, hearty laugh, pulled into the wave of cheer and relief like it's carrying him. Then they all dig in, eat, drink, and sing together, full blast. At the heart of the village, an enormous bonfire roars against the night sky, burning brighter than anyone thought possible, while the White Wolf tribe's victory feast keeps raging for 3 non-stop days and nights. When the long celebration finally fades, a heavy silence rushes in. Haiji, Cruel, and Sustan line up before Igil, Surya, and the other tribe elders, ready to take their lead. Egil drops his head low, soaking in the tribe's overwhelming gratitude, and he thanks AG for everything. Then AG, looking a little humbled himself, admits he only did a small bit to help. The tribe leader keeps going, saying the tribe would have stayed stuck in fear of the Asu hounds if Haiji hadn't shown up, and he makes it crystal clear that Haiji is the reason they can finally reunite as one pack again. Then Haiji leans in and listens, eyes sharp and focused, as he starts to answer. His speech slams to a stop as every last white wolf from Gaul and Suria's pack bows in perfect sync, pure, silent respect and gratitude aimed at him, even as the cruel surprise hangs in the air. He and the rest of the white wolf tribe drop their heads together in one powerful motion, their gratitude hitting like thunder, and they formally thank Lord Haji for everything he's done for them. He stands there in total silence, face locked in an unreadable mask, while a gentle wind sweeps by and steals the small leaves away. A banner snaps in the wind as an official announcement roars out, proclaiming the hero's departure. His mind snaps back to that instant, mounted, ready to bolt, and he finally gets it. He's just a figurehead, a flashy hero for show, while the real punch comes from the knights riding right beside him. He stared down a row of faceless, armored soldiers, and as he braced to hear why they were here, his resolve turned to steel. The memory slips away, yanking him back to the present. Then Sue and Cruel stand beside him. He waves off their gratitude because he insists he's the one who should be thankful. With a steady smile, he offers a hand of friendship and tells them to drop by anytime, promising they'll share another drink down the road. Eagle grabs the handshake with a big, honest grin and immediately nods, gladly accepting the invitation, while beside him, Surya lights up like her heart just found its home. His warm words snap a brutal truth into Cruel's head. Her eyes fly wide as the realization hits her like a sucker punch. Haiji, was he planning to slip back to his own kind real soon? Sue glances back at her parents, sadness pinching her heart, and then Eagle steps forward, telling Haiji that Sue chose the perilous path of a warrior herself, and now the whole tribe stands behind her with open arms. The young girl steels herself and speaks like she finally found her purpose, asking Haiji to teach her everything, because one day she'll grow strong enough to protect everyone in the White Wolf tribe. With her goals locked in, she tilts her head up to her companions and declares she wants to stick close to Haiji and Cruel. Cruel's smile blooms with warmth at her words, but Haiji freezes, clearly stunned by how sincere she is. She belts out a bright, fearless cry, then snaps into a happy smile with her eyes closing tight. Right after her determined shout, Haiji whips around to face Sue's parents and admits her choice could land them in trouble. But before he can even finish, they all interrupt him, laughing it off. Everything's totally okay. He explains that this is the road their daughter chose for herself, and Surya quietly backs her up, saying all they can do now is believe in Sue, while Haiji soaks it all in, eyes sharpening with thoughtful focus. With her parents' blessing in hand, the moment to leave finally slams into place. Haiji, Sue, and the ruthless wave tear themselves away from the gathered White Wolf tribe, who cheer them on like they're sending warriors into legend. As they step off, Haiji and Sue clasp hands, instant closeness, a brand new bond forged with every step. In Wirral's grand throne room, King Veiled III sits high on his throne while his minister stands at his side. Then an armored hero from Duquesne holds her ground at a distance and keeps telling the terrible news, her voice ringing as she reports they've been crushed again. The king's face twists with pure frustration as he snaps that Hyro Kani's gift, Guardian of the Wind, should have made her unstoppable compared to every Hyro before her, while the other Hyro, Haiji Grimasus, nods along, even as they both taste the harsh truth in the air. He slams his armored head onto the polished floor in a desperate bow, then roars, demanding answers, screaming why they got crushed even with all that power. The king can only stare, stunned into silence by the raw anguish on display. Lamence's failure hangs in the air, and Kanna's voice slices right through the tension. She locks eyes and declares, crystal clear, that the soldiers aren't to blame for the loss. Kneeling beside Haiji, she keeps begging, telling the king she doesn't care what punishment hits her, as long as he does pin the blame on his soldiers. She drops her head low and makes her request to the king in full ceremony, and the moment her words land, he drags a finger through his beard like he's weighing every syllable, then asks if that's all she came to say. Before she can answer, Kane steps in and declares that every bit of blame for the defeat is on her shoulders. That declaration hangs there, sharp as a blade. Then a jolt of shock flashes across her face, and the moment it fades, her expression turns to stone as her features sink into darkness, and she accepts she's a defeated general. Far from the capital, the sun blazes over a forest path. An original hero wipes the sweat off his brow and snaps, "Has Cruel been found yet?" Nearby, Cruel and Sue comb the area and Sue insists, this has to be the place. Watched Cruel's horned companion slam her net toward a tree trunk and shout that she'd finally found it. He followed her gaze and froze at a huge, dripping chunk of honeycomb hanging from the tree. Sue, the cat-eared girl, practically squealed that this honey was insanely sweet, her all-time favorite, while Hagi pointed at a different spot overhead and demanded to know what it was. A giant beetle, Hercules-sized, was crunching honey while it trapped the tension like a living snare, and he pointed out the uncanny match, saying insects like this were everywhere in his world. Sue stared in pure confusion, and Cruel fired her up with encouragement for what came next. Sue took that as her signal, shot ahead with her net blazing, and yelled for them to catch up, while Haiji, gasping just to keep up, begged her not to push too deep into the woods, warning that danger lurked there. His warning hit right on time. When the bushes rustled, a massive bear burst into view, and even its head wore a weird crown-like robe. He instantly clocked it. The honey's scent must have lured this beast in, and when he spotted the monster, dread hit him hard. A crown bear, roaring like a war drum the second it opened its mouth. As the bear lunged and swung that massive clawed paw to smash him, both Cruel and Sue screamed his name in pure terror. Then he tensed for the hit, but before the blow landed, a young woman with long dark hair burst onto the scene and triggered a swirling, glowing magical artifact. A burst of brilliant power exploded from the device, blasting the crown bearer and launching them up through the air, faster than the eye could track. Then the savior snapped into view, in one ducan, cradling a glowing orb of light. Haiji froze in disbelief, shouting her name, and she smiled back at him after so long, telling him she wouldn't let him summon her just to toss her aside. Sue thrusts a cup into her hands, beaming the whole time, and when Inducana takes a sip, she realizes it's barley tea, something she hasn't tasted since she arrived in this world. Hagi grins and tells her cold barley tea is perfect for summer, then offers to grab her a cup too, while beside him, Cruel hisses under her breath that he's snagged yet another woman, calling him a disgusting lecher, and Sue, right there listening, demands to know where she even learned that word. Cruel straight up demands to know about Haji's women, and Haji shuts it down fast. Those women are just his housemates. Then Kan pivots to the Haji blacksmith shop, and Haji nods. Cruel and Sue both pitch in and help him with the work. The crew finally sinks into the home's plain, rustic workshop, built to get the job done, not to pamper anyone. Later inside the forge, Haji tells Kanai, "This is my workplace right now," and then he admits how meeting Cruel and Sue turned blacksmithing into something he actually loves. Sure, there are risks, but he's still thankful to the king for giving him this chance. But she stares him down, demanding to know how his second life even started in a place like this. Then, with a straight face, she says she's got plenty of questions for him as she asks him to show her how to forward disorder. At the anvil, Kane slams the hammer down with shocking force, and a blinding flash bursts through the air. Haiji stares in disbelief, unable to wrap his head around why she genuinely want to learn swordsmithing from him. Because to him, it's all just a smile hiding her real feelings behind a perfectly built mask. Cruel remarks fly about how Kane's form is perfect, just like hero Haji, and the second she looks rattled by the compliment, Haji starts wrestling inside, debating whether he should push her for the real reason she came to him. Hain kicked off her training in the forge, and Cruel fed her non-stop lessons. At first, the air felt tense for days, but then something clicked, and before long she was getting along great with both Cruel and Sue, fitting right into their home like she'd always belonged. With this new vibe rolling, Kane beamed and asked Haiji what kind of onigiri he wanted today, and Haiji snapped that it didn't matter, while Sue lit up and begged for one packed with wild veggies. Kane then teased Haiji, laughing that he just totally didn't get the point. A few days later, her hard work finally paid off. She forged a blade to perfection. Standing right in front of Haiji, Sue, and Cruel, Ken raised that gleaming sword high, and with pride blazing in her voice, she announced, "It's done." As he locked eyes on the weapon, Cruel flat out confirmed it. Sure, she'd helped a bit, but that sword was unmistakably Canny's work. Haiji kept staring, mind spinning over the craftsmanship, wondering if Canny really forged it with her own hands. He snatched up the rapier, heart pounding, because for a total amateur this was insane, though he couldn't shake the thought that the weird quirks of his forge might have helped. He wheeled toward Kane and demanded to know why she'd chosen to craft a rapier. Before she could even breathe out a word, he shot her a wild proposal. "Let's spar." He said it straight. He wanted to fight her, and Kane just stood there, replaying his challenge in pure, stunned disbelief. He thrust the rapier forward, primed for battle, and as Kane clutched the sword she'd just forged, a bizarre vision started to bloom in her mind. Sue and Cruel got hit with a sudden challenge, and they both froze on the sidelines, staring in stunned, wide-eyed disbelief. She's flustered out of her mind, stammering while Haiji keeps pressing her for an answer, and from across the training yard, Cruel and Sue watch the clash play out. With her resolve locked in, she insists she'll test the sword herself. She's strong enough to handle it. Haiji doesn't buy it for a second, snapping back that he can't see her matching him and wondering why she thinks she even needs to try. His question slams her pause button the moment the truth of his suspicion clicks, because the blade she forged is etched with Haiji's name, and when he points that out, he can't hide the shock at how weird it is for her to be testing a weapon she made for someone else. He snaps his tone, throws his hands up like it's nothing, and agrees to her terms. Then he makes a wager. If she can land even one hit on him, he'll give her anything she wants, and with a fearless grin, she accepts the challenge. The cheerful vibe dies instantly as his face hardens again. He demands she tell him the truth, and makes it clear he can't trust her if she keeps hiding things from him. To drive the point home, he whips out a long, polished katana, its blade flashing bright, and declares he wants her to teach him exactly what she's hiding. Kan answers by yanking her freshly forged rapier free with a razor-sharp clang, and right across from her, the other fighter squares up, both blades up and ready, because the duel is about to explode into action. The duel ignites in a blink. Haiji rockets forward, but Kanai slips aside and fires off a glowing orb as a ruthless counter, and Haiji freezes, eyes popping at the surprise tactic, while Kroll watches in real time as Kanai proves she's done retreating. She shoved Haiji's question aside like it didn't matter, then snapped into motion, not toward him but toward the cruel one, so fast and vicious that both Haiji and the dragon girl froze in shock. Her blade snapped forward and exploded in a blinding flash. Metal shrapnel ripped through the air, and Haiji got slammed off his feet, skidding hard. Kanei stared at the aftermath with pure realization blazing across her face. He shoved himself upright, eyes locked on that shattered sword on the ground, and then he grilled her about her aim, seeing right through her immaturity. Her forging was rushed, her strike was wild, and he could tell she didn't truly commit. If she'd gone all in, that blade would have never snapped. He inched closer, pressing her for answers, what was so important that it made her throw caution to the wind. His face snapped into shock the second he saw her clutch the broken hilt, then she yanked her gaze up to him, voice shaking, starting a desperate plea. Tears blasted down her face as she screamed his name, begging for help, praying he'd save her master, Belphibia. She finally cracked the case. This whole nightmare was tied to her master, who'd been snatched up by a demon. In the throne room, King Veiled II squares up to the armored hero. Canny, his face locked in ruthless fury as he spits that her wish to rescue Belphibia is unforgivable. Stunned, Canny can only blurt out, "Why?" From far away, you can spot Master Swordwoman Belphibia standing alone, and the king points her out as the Swordwoman of Purple Lightning, someone who saved countless soldiers in brutal battles. Then he turns to the room and demands why they'd throw away a hero like her, a truly meritorious fighter. He keeps the pressure on. Sure, Belphibia is a deadly swordswoman, but she lacks the hero's special tricks. And then he shoves the question at Kanei. Does she really think they should dump the warrior just because of that? The king lays out their grim reality, reminding her that the kingdom has already bled out countless soldiers in past wars. Then he pushes the hard truth. If her presence alone is what keeps the kingdom standing, then that's the only road left, and he's basically daring the world to accept that a sacrifice might be inevitable. The royal minister warns that rushing in a rescue party will just spill even more soldiers' blood, but Kanna snaps back, saying the demon lord's troops are already crushing them, and they can't spare the strength to save Elphibia. Then her eyes harden with grim resolve. If nobody else steps up, she'll go alone. Kanna's defiant declaration hits like a thunderclap, and the king and his minister freeze into stunned silence. Kanna whips around, stunned to see them clearly disapprove. King's face tightens as he jabs a finger at her, snarling that she's not going anywhere alone. No hero gets marched to the battlefield without a real plan. He orders her to rein in her emotions and keep a cool head. Then the royal minister smirks, ice cold, and declares they'll seize every last one of her weapons. The minister's grin stretches way too far. He towers over the hero and smugly tells her to rest easy, but his tone screams that she's their prisoner now. A calm, heavy understanding drifted over the far-off snow-capped peaks, and in that moment, that was exactly how everything had landed here. Soon after, Haiji and Kanny pushed through a thick, winding forest, cloaks swallowing their shapes as they moved. He snapped his head toward her, frustration blazing in his voice. Why hadn't she told him everything from the start? Kanny didn't flinch. She said she never wanted to wreck the peaceful life he was finally living. Those memories flooded back to the time she'd watched him, happy just being himself, until everything snapped the moment she saw a monstrous bear mauling him, and she couldn't help but rush after him. Then right there in the present, she asked if he was really okay with the path they're on now, like, for real. He brushed it off, snapping that she didn't think they'd dragged themselves this far for nothing, did she? But even with all that swagger, Kan finally confessed the truth. She was still scared. Her resolve didn't waver, because Belphir was burned into her mind. He was the first one who ever truly recognized Sesai Jink, and that meant one thing: she had to rescue her. Their journey slammed them right up to a dark, foreboding woodland, and Kan explained it plain. This was the start of the demon tribe's territory, an unsettling, ominous forest that felt like it was watching. She kept going, saying that about 2 weeks ago, a brutal war between the Wirral kingdom and the demon tribe raged right here in this same land, and her intel swore there was a stash of mithril, along with late dormit, hidden beneath the Black Forest. Turns out the whole war ignited over who would seize those priceless deposits, the native demon tribe or the creeping humans. And the result was brutal. The kingdom, Kanna and Belphir got crushed, then they were shoved into a retreat all the way north. She marches beside Haiji through the forest, pressing him about where his hero's gear ended up, then throws in the gut punch that her own weapons were snatched, and taken the moment she got cast out. He shoots back a grin, saying Cruel and Sue only suggested that skirt, and when a shy blush blooms on her cheeks as she yanks at her cloak, he tells her not to worry, it's totally fine. He pivots to weapon talk, draws his katana just enough to make the air feel heavier, and asks if it's actually smart for him to be holding her sword, because honestly, he's convinced she should be the one swinging it. He flashes a confident grin and tells her, "Don't worry, I've got my own secret weapon." Kana studies him, hooked by the mystery, and then he urges them to move now because Belfier is sure to start panicking. Right on cue, the sky flips and heavy rain crashes down, and back at their lodgings, Cruel stands staring out the window, concern written all over her face as the downpour hammers on. With her back to the room, she keeps staring down the storm, murmuring Haiji's name like a prayer, asking the air if he's okay. Her mind snaps back to the moments right before he left. She stood in the doorway, staring him down, demanding to know why he had to go, and he just said he was going, then ordered her to stay behind and keep watch. She laid it all out for him. Yes, she knew how strong he was, but she made one point clear. That's exactly why he couldn't let himself fight alone, because he needed her there to protect Sue. And when he showed her that kind of trust, it hit her like a shock. His faith left her flustered and overwhelmed, and a deep blush flooded her face. She stood there with arms locked tight across her chest, jaw clenched, and the moment Sue reached out with a worried hand, her tension only seemed to grow. Sue closed the gap and wrapped the dragon girl in a tight, soothing hug, whispering to Cruel, "It's going to be okay." Cruel sank into the embrace, nodding along as he promised Hagi would absolutely come back, and they just sat there together, eyes on the rainy window, until his return. Meanwhile, way out in demon territory, Haiji and Kani pushed through a pitch-black forest. Then Kani screamed, "Haiji, get down," and Haiji spun around. That's when her warning finally made sense. Then a huge, clawed foot slid into view and dropped onto the force floor with terrifying silence. Two hulking horned beastmen burst out of the shadows, torches blazing as they stalked through the woods, their grim, unstoppable power lighting up the dark. Crouched beside Haiji, Kane hissed that this was demon turf and they'd better stay sharp, because her people's hearing could snatch a whisper out of the dark. Then Haiji nodded, but his face screamed he was already locked onto something else. He leaned in, a sneaky little smile tugging at his lips as he praised how close her face was, and Kan just froze, staring back completely flustered by his sudden remark. Kane shoots forward and clamps a finger to his lips with a sharp hiss, silencing him before a word can slip out, her eyes blazing with panic. Just as the beastmen scouts they spotted earlier snap to attention nearby, one gripping a crude torch that slices through the dark. The beast men aren't just a small threat, they're bigger than they looked at first, a brutal pack of warriors whose glowing eyes slice through the forest, hunting for something to crush. Kan hides her face from sight, anxiously raking her fingers through her hair as she whispers that a demon army is creeping near, while Haiji, drenched in sweat, frets that they're hunting for Belle. Then their eyes lock onto a beastman procession. These giants hoist a lavish palanquin on their shoulders, clearly marching to deliver someone wildly important. A long-haired beast man with towering horns sneers as he says the woman they're sending to their lord is lucky as hell, and that she should have wasted away in the wilderness instead, while inside the palanquin, a girl in a white kimono sits perfectly still, saying nothing at all. AG stares as the whole scene crashes in, his face twisted with confusion, while Kana leans in, sorting through the beastman's words and quietly repeating the part about a lord. With a bone-jarring thud, the beastman slammed the palanquin onto the force floor. Then everything froze, the occupant perfectly still, hands folded like a queen, while the curtain drifted shut. Suddenly, the beastman leader whips his head toward them, his senses screaming that someone's there. He lets out a brutal roar and demands, "Who's hiding?" Haiji's eyes flare wide, not with fear but with instant recognition. He stammers the captive's name in shock, Belsan-B. He stood there frozen while the beastman leader laughed at their discovery, and somehow Kane still looked like he wanted to explode. Realizing the trap, he snatched Kane and yelled for them to run, because if they got caught, rescue would be dead on arrival. Kane froze for a beat, then demanded what they'd do about their master. She snapped back that they were going to fly, and warned him not to bite his tongue. He didn't even get a second to process it before she hurled him into the air, and he screamed in shock. They slammed down in a burst of light, safe and sound in a clearing miles from the mountains, right as they'd just bolted. The moment they were finally safe, Kan bowed deep in gratitude, thanking Haiji like her life depended on it, because without him, she would have charged in blind and reckless. Still reeling from that sudden escape, he could barely get the words out, begging her to give him a heads up next time, because what he went through was downright terrifying. Then he blurted that this was his first time seeing her wild gift, Guardian of the Wind, and he couldn't believe it, saying they were even because if she hadn't stepped in, the demon would have swallowed him alive. Far off, the beastman leader lounged without a twitch, replaying the standing order. humans would be dragged out as sacrifices, and anyone who fought back would be cut down on the spot. The word sacrifice hit him like a punch, horror flooding his chest as the meaning sank in. So does this mean they're turning to him, whispering that they'll slip into the enemy's position without anyone seeing them? He jabs a finger forward with grim resolve, sealing their goal in one breath, while Kan watches, confirming they've hit their exact destination. Ahead of them, tucked inside a brutal mountain range, sits a colossal city, its towering spires glowing with otherworldly light pouring down from the heavens. They tear through the city streets, cloaks snapping behind them as they sprint toward a towering central structure, while a lone beastman guard stands there like a statue, totally oblivious to their stealthy arrival. They slip into the grand building and creep down the long hallway, holding their breath. Then, through an open doorway, they spot her, a high-ranking elven woman, sitting alone by the window. Elsewhere in the stronghold, the beast men are packed into the great hall, roaring and carousing as they gorge on food and drink, completely glued to the feast. The elven woman, blissfully unaware of the watchers, sinks a heavy, exhausted sigh, her face twisting into pure sorrow. She keeps it all to herself, wondering how things spiraled into this, until Haiji and Kanai burst through the doorway. His boot thuds on the stone floor and smashes her silence in an instant. The elf matriarch freezes in shock, blurting out Kanai and Haiji Dono's names as she demands to know why they're here. So Haiji steps up fast, says it's simple. They came to rescue her, and he's just relieved to find that she, the master of Belfair, is safe. Hannah barrels forward and crushes the elven woman in a tight embrace, catching the elf matriarch off guard as she blurts out, "Do they really know where they are, in the demon trash's domain?" She tells her that as a hero from another world, she's got barely anyone she can truly trust, and it all breaks her heart. She pleads through tears for the woman not to ditch her disciple and vanish off on her own, while in the background, Haiji just silently watches the whole emotional mess unfold. The elf matriarch's face melts into a warm smile as she tenderly strokes Kanny's hair, whispering that this is a real mess, because right now, she needs Kanny to be alone. AG strides forward and gives the matriarch his thanks for humoring Kanai's emotional explosion, then openly admits he feels the exact same way. He then shouts that they have to break out fast, before they can hand her over as a sacrifice, and he turns to her and calls her master to her face. Her face twists into full-on confusion. "A sacrifice," she repeats, like the word itself won't click in her head. Suddenly, a terrifying presence slams into the room. An imposing figure in formal clothes steps out, his feet morphing from human to clawed beast as he glares down and snarls, asking how some mere human dares to invade his hall. Staring down that towering menace, Haiji clocks that he's not dealing with an ordinary guy at all. Lord smirks, a demon race brute. Then the beastman snarls, asking what a measly human is doing in his territory, and Haiji tightens his massive fist in and, right as the moment hits, he drops from above and crashes onto the stone floor with earth-shaking power. Boom. The ground explodes into a blizzard of shattered rocks, and a violent shockwave ripples through the chamber, rocking everyone off their feet. As the dust starts to drift, Ken lunges forward and yells at Haiji to back off right now. He grips a chunk of rubble, staring in stunned disbelief at how that blast just obliterated the floor. The beast man smirks and taunts him, asking if he actually dodged the attack. Eyes bulging with pure panic at the way everything wobbled and shook, Haiji roared for Bell and Kanai to dive behind him, now for safety. Kanai heedlessly obeys his warning and slams the elf matriarch out of the way, just as a massive chunk of the ceiling detonates downward. He watches the elf matriarch get slammed to the ground amid flying debris, while the beast man lord looms over him with zero concern as more of the structure starts crashing down. The matriarch swears she's fine, but her voice wavers and fades with doubt. His eyes lock onto Kanai, now crumpled on the ground, bleeding and hurt. She brushes off her pain and begs Haiji to flee with her master, even as he can only choke out her name, stunned and sick with horror. Before Haiji can even move, the Beastman Lord towers over both of them, roaring that they won't go anywhere. This is the end, their time is up. Haiji clenches his teeth, rage surging in helpless fury. Staring down the giant of a figure, Haiji calmly tells the elf matriarch and the wounded Kine to breathe and insists they're wrong. Then he locks eyes with the matriarch and swears he'll protect her no matter what. Kania jerks in shock as a voice from her injured spot shouts his name, and the elf matriarch freezes too, eyes bulging, cheeks flushing as he promises to shield her. She snaps back into control in a flash, a determined smile locking in as she hands over both her life and her master's dam. Then Haiji's face turns stone, his grip cinching tight around his katana's hilt. He juts the blade forward, and its tip starts to glow with a razor-thin light, while Kani's voice snaps from behind him. Look at what's coming. The Beastman Lord stands across the shattered ground, stone cold and unimpressed. Then he snaps, asks if the talk's done, and orders the human out of Belphibia, declaring that facing him is flat-out impossible. He throws out a terrifying ultimatum, stay and Hagi dies here. But the hero doesn't fold. He stands defiant, sword raised, resolve locked in. Hagi boldly calls out his name, and the beastman lord, Albik, smirks like he already owns the place, claiming he's the master of this whole domain. Albik then fires off a challenge. If Hagi loses, he has to atone for desecrating their sacred ceremony, but if he wins, Albik lets him walk out with both the matriarch and Kana. Once the rules are sealed, Albik officially dares the brave Hagi to a duel. He stands poised for the duel, a hooded cloak snapping over his armor, while his katana hangs at his side, tip grazing the cracked, broken ground, as he stares down his opponent. Beastman Lord Albik flashes a predatory grin, then surges at HG in a blur, massive cleaver-like sword lifted high. HG's eyes go wide. A bead of sweat pops up as he braces for the impossible speed of the strike with. With a deafening clang, a massive blade comes crashing down. Hagi whips his katana up at the last second, sparks exploding in the air as the force slams him back, and he clenches his teeth, instantly realizing there's no matching that kind of brute strength. Crushed beneath that brutal pressure, Albuk throws taunts his way, bragging that he's going to push the hero past his breaking point. So Hagi snaps back at full volume, shouting down the beast man, Lord Brown. From the sidelines, the elf matriarch watches with a hard, grim stare, feeling the power gap like a death sentence. If this keeps going, Haji's defeat is sealed. Albert leans in, sneers as he slams his blade to stop Hagi, then chuckles that it's a truly fine sword, just doomed in the hands of its current owner. Hannah locks onto the duel and suddenly realizes something. She recognizes his moves, knowing he's luring Albek's attacks, just like she did in her own fight. The elf matriarch snaps her head toward her, worried out of her mind. Kane, she starts. But Kane stays cool, smiles her way through the fear, and promises her master is totally fine. The matriarch isn't buying it. She admits Haji's weapon looks insane, but his technique feels raw, like a human trying to drive a monster. She hammers the idea that with a blade like that, he should slice through anything. And while she talks, the fight doesn't stop. Two combatants crash together again and again, steel smashing in a brutal, furious clash. Kin gets yanked apart in an instant. His sword rockets upward, spinning through the sky, while he locks eyes on the alarm from the sidelines, realizing his blade was brutally repelled. With his opponent's weapon wiped away, the Beastman Lord looms over Albik, towering and deadly, his massive blade hanging over Albik like a guillotine, ready to fall as Albik snarls that his win is already in his hands. He slams the weapon down with a crushing thud, shattering the stone beneath him. But before it can land, Haiji has already lunged aside, barely dodging that devastating strike. As Kane slams to the ground, he cries out his name in pure panic, but Haiji grits through the pain and lunges for a small object at his hip, his face set with ruthless determination. He doesn't pull a sword, he yanks out a tiny plain knife instead. The Beastman Lord stares in confusion like, "What are you even doing?" Because this looks less like a plan and more like pure desperation. A blade flashes with a jolt of surprise light, an S-rank kitchen knife forged by Hagi himself, and it's a secret weapon meant to strike when you least expect it. Clutching that plain little weapon, he fires off a question to Albik. "Do you still want to fight?" And the Beastman Lord just freezes, stunned by how fast everything flips. The crowd finally clicks. Kane realizes the truth. That kitchen knife is his secret weapon, and he's been hiding it the whole time. Albert swallows his pride, admits defeat, and vows to honor the pact by taking his bride. Meanwhile, Haiji just freezes, stunned and lost. Who on earth is this so-called balsam bride? He froze in utter confusion as Beastman Lord Albik snapped his focus onto the elf matriarch, and then dropped the bombshell. His duel with Haji had one goal, to win Belle as his wife. The elf matriarch's cheeks erupted deep red, her eyes darting away as an unmistakable little heart flashed in her pupil, and the shock hit Haji like a body blow. He gasped, staring in pure disbelief. Marriage. In the dead quiet darkness, an eye snaps open. Consciousness snaps back into Belfaya, the elf swordswoman. She jolts awake in some strange bed, her body clamped down in tight bandages. Right beside her Albik, the big horned beast man, charges in with a face full of panic and pure relief. "You're awake," he blurts. Belfaya struggles to speak and starts laying it out. She'd been in the Black Forest, then got torn away from her companions. He pushes her to slow down, reminding her she's still hurting. Then, like proof on the spot, she clenches at her wounds with a grimace. Albi leans in to confer with the elf matriarch, mulling over if his actions really need a reason at all. Then she just stares back and asks, "Where are we?" Then he faces the huge crowd of his warriors and declares the Mazoku don't bow to the weak, they crave strength. And he also thinks the humans already know about that recent assault. His mind snaps right back to the fight, watching the hero carve through his enemies with razor-sharp swordsmanship, holding the line so his comrades could run, and even though it cost Albuk his own soldiers, he still couldn't help admiring that brutal, unbreakable resolve. An elderly, goblin-like attendant barges into Belfia's room and tells her, "Nobody here would dare hurt your master, so breathe easy, and take all the time you need to recover." I swear the elf matriarch sits there like nothing's wrong beside Albik, then she tells it straight. If he hadn't shown up, she would have died in the Black Forest. Haiji and Kani are shaken to the core. Haiji's stomach drops as horror finally clicks. This Albic Mizuku is their master's benefactor, the exact same person he swung his sword against, and Kani's panic matches his as she finally blurts out that she'd even called him an evil spirit, her face drained of color. Shame crashed over them as they both bowed hard in apology to the Beastman Lord. Then Albic, lounging at the head of that long table, flicked his hand like it was nothing, telling them he gets it, because they were only trying to protect their comrades. This forgiveness barely dents Comcana. She snaps upright so fast it's like she's been yanked by the collar, then demands to know why he's marrying her master. Right next to her, the elf matriarch calmly sips her drink with a peaceful smile, and Albic calmly tells her he won their duel, so it's settled for good. The tale snaps back to how that duel was born. Once Belfair healed from her wounds, it was her who stepped forward and challenged Albic to a match, and Albic remembers how ruthless and deadly her fighting really was. Two combatants squared off, eyes locked like knives in the dark. Then tension snapped and the clash was ready to explode. Belfair lunged with a silver blur of steel, but the duel didn't end in a clash. It ended when Albic's strike smashed her blade to pieces, finishing it cold. He thought, like a quiet gut punch, that this was a Mozoku-style duel, a concept the heroes had never even heard of. Back in the present, Haiji and Kanai stand there stunned by Albic's account, while Albic keeps talking, saying that in Mazoka tradition, if a woman falls to a stronger male, she has to become his mate. Then he grits it out. He never thought he'd ever run into someone tougher than himself. Eiji shoots up and yells that he's a man, so he can't marry Albuck, and the Beastman Lord just laughs, claiming he goes for strong women. Right then the elf matriarch steps in, her robe slips open, and her back is revealed. She speaks coolly like it's obvious, saying that's exactly why she can become his maid, and it leaves his two pupils totally wrecked. Eiji is dripping sweat, fist clenched, and he hammers out the question, why are humans and the Mizuku at war? Albic, the Beastman Lord, sprawls like it's nothing, answers with a blunt, I don't know, and tells the hero to go home, because they're gearing up to intercept his people. Haynes slams Albic with the question, why are you so hostile to humans if you don't even care about the war? And Albic fires back that the Mizuku are a pure race, unlike the kingdom, which is a mixed bag of species. He insists they don't dream of conquering human lands, but if a chance to grab real, valuable territory shows up, they won't hesitate. Albic keeps watching, smirking as he admits that sure, humans used to be a real problem, but their new gear is shockingly flimsy, with a wave that says not worth it. He declares they'll always take a good fight, yet right now they're too busy gearing up for the Great Demon Festival. He whips his head toward Kanai, concern etched all over his face, and blurts out, seriously, how are we even supposed to be enemies when the Mizuku act like we're nothing but background noise? After a beat of deep thought, it clicks for him. He finally gets it, and he shoots out an apology for that earlier outburst. Then he leans in and asks Albuck, is there anything I can do to help? The Beastman Lord stares back, shock flashing across his face, and snaps that the hero is wildly naive. Right there the elf matriarch drains a bottle of wine like it's nothing, and Albic can't help thinking he expected humans to be more sly, until he notices, just like Belfair, his fresh fiancée has a heart so pure it practically glows. Then the matriarch, still halfway through her drink, drops the truth casually. She's a dark elf. Then the Beastman Lord swings his focus right back to Haji and throws him a weird demand. He asks for a knife, but makes it clear a normal one would be too risky in his hands, so he wants something blunter. Haji just stares, visibly baffled, like he's trying to make sense of why. He froze in pure disbelief as the Beastman Lord raised a hand and tossed out a new number, 500. Then Haji stammered and blurted it back, praying he wasn't hearing wrong. The Beastman Lord leaned in and doubled down on his offer, saying the Mizuku could forge advanced metalwork, even swords packed with magic, and after admitting he'd heard how brutal things had gone between humans and his people, he promised it was time to build a real, honest trade relationship. Then he made it clear, the Mizuku usually stayed away from humans, but Haiji was different. With a sharp point straight at him, Albuck declared, I trust you, plain and simple. Leaning in, Albuck formally demanded that Haji confirm the deal, insisting that they'd already tried trading with other nations, all because he wanted his own people to benefit. After a beat of deep thought, Haga's face snapped into determination, and he gave his consent. Albi finally confirmed Haji was in. Then the moment the deal was sealed, the Beastman Lord clamped down and firmly shook Haji's armored hands. After a while, the crew, Haji Kane and Belfier included, stood side by side in a wide open field, their bodies softly shimmering as they stared down a far-off mountain range capped in snow. Shelfeya told her companions they'd head straight back to the royal palace first. Then Kanai turned to her, worried that her apprentice might feel alone without her. She bowed so deeply the room felt it, pouring out gratitude she'd never be able to repay, and Haiji met it with a warm grin. Since they both came from the same homeland, she shouldn't hesitate to come to him the moment trouble hit. She nodded with pure excitement and clamped onto his hand like it meant something, while Belle just stared on with a deadpan face. Meanwhile, Haiji started thinking, so his master and Kana really are getting along now, huh? His thoughts got yanked to a stop the moment both women grabbed his arms. Haiji froze in total shock while Kan fired back, demanding to know when he decided she'd be his life partner, and Belle stayed cool as ice, asking for confirmation that she really was the one he'd chosen. He just stood there, frozen in shock, as Belle told him that she and Hagi had promised to stay together, even without any formal contract, and the two women locked eyes with him, trading razor-sharp glares while the hero couldn't move. Their argument kept exploding. Belle snapped at Kane for showing zero respect to the master, and Kane fired back that Belle was the one who pushed Haiji into that promise right after their duel. They finally shut it down and turned to Haiji, ready for his call. They realized he'd already bolted, and the two women just froze, staring at the empty air, his voice still calling out their names from far away as he vanished. He tore through the forest at blinding speed, sprinting as far away as he could from that argument. He glanced back over his shoulder with a breath of relief, smiling like he finally had a clear path to his destination. He snaps his gaze upward to spot Cruel spiraling around in her dragon form. Then, boom, his focus lands on her humanoid shape as Sue comes charging in, squealing with joy, and he blurts out Cruel's name with a flicker of shock in his voice. The next second they slam into him, Sue and Cruel, locking him in a tight embrace, their arms cinched securely around his back. They pressed their faces to him, shutting their eyes as relief hit, and Sue blurted out how happy she was that he finally came back, while Cruel echoes seemed to welcome him home. He's still rigid in their embrace, eyes bulging with pure confusion as he stammers, totally lost and unable to make sense of what's happening. The three of them huddle together in the grass, soaking in the open sky while this reunion keeps rolling on, quiet for just a beat. As the minutes drag on, night crashes in, and the whole scene slides into a quiet wooden house, calm, still, and tucked under sky exploding with stars. The next morning, Hagi jolts awake in a bed, stretches and blurts out, "Is it really morning?" Right as he's figuring it out, a young man pops into the doorway, grins at him, and tells him, cheerfully, that cruelty is coming for him. Those words snap the shock onto Haiji's face. The young man keeps going, saying he's already fired up the furnace and hammered out a bunch of items. Haiji is completely stunned, stumbling over his words as he blurts out, "What's going on?" His confusion exploded the moment a familiar face stepped into view. He blurted her name in pure disbelief. Kana stood right there, gripping a blacksmith's hammer, smiling brightly as she said she decided to train in the craft here, at this very place. With her eyes closed and a soft smile, she admitted she'd quit being a hero, then leaned in and asked him for his guidance and support as she stepped into her new endeavor. After everything that just happened, Indukuni is now officially part of Haiji's little crew. Haiji, Cruel, and Sue are finally sharing the same household. As soon as the new member joined, they crashed into building an extension for her. While Haiji worked, his mind kept drifting back to the capital, where the king fretted over whether the kingdom could hold up without a Tyro Kana. Still, with all three of them teaming up, that new room got finished in a flash. Even though the build was a success, Hagi stared at their finished work with a troubled look, and unease just wouldn't let go. The tense mood hit everyone at once. Kan spotted it from the doorway and asked what was wrong, with Cruel and Sue echoing her concern, while Haiji whipped around, trying to brush it off with "It's nothing." Cruel pushed him harder, demanding to know what he was talking about, and Haiji finally admitted it wasn't nothing at all, then tried to dodge the fear by insisting their food supply was totally fine. His deflection attempt flopped. Haiji snapped around to face them, grim as death, and said the real problem was the tamagain, the special steel he swears by. Kani, baffled, demanded the full story. At last, the real reason for his worry snapped into focus. He'd run out completely. She looked cruelly confused for a second, thinking he was talking about rice, but Hagi shut that down fast. He then laid it out. The tamahagin was the essential metal you needed to forge a truly great blade. He hefted a lump of dark steel, harder than iron, packed with hardly any impurities. Then her eyes lit up as she said, "Tamahagin's got amazing forgeable power," and explained that when iron heats up, it bonds fast under the hammer. It's the secret behind Japanese swords. Then she leaned in, desperate to learn more, just as Haiji started teaching, and a hammer crashed down on glowing metal against the anvil. Tamahagin isn't made. It's forged the old Japanese way, through Tatara ironworking, and this process got brought to this world by the hero who came before. Because this history felt downright cruel, right in the middle of biting, Indukana blurted out the burning question, what would they do without a Tamahagang? Then pushed harder, asking her superior whether an A-rank knife would still be enough. He broke it down. Someone wanted a knife for Albec, a demon tribe monster, and Haiji remembered the same kind of demand aimed at his craft, then shut it down flat. Without the right material, there was no way he could forge an S-rank blade. At that exact moment, the workshop's master craftsman cut in dead serious, saying Albic had caused nothing but trouble and that he was still going to carry out his request. Then he softly stroked Cruel's head, and Cruel couldn't help wondering aloud about Albic, remembering how Belfier had promised him he was a good person. The craftsman's face darkened the moment he confirmed their trouble. Tamahagane wasn't something you could just grab. Cruel didn't even flinch, demanding to know if it was brighter and shinier than plain steel. He admitted it couldn't be whipped up like some easy tool, and he swore no one else could make it, not outside his own forge. Then realization struck like a blade, and she spun toward a nearby door, yelling that her personal treasury might have the exact thing he needed. With a confident grin, she claimed her collection might be exactly what they needed, leaving Haiji, Sue, and Canny staring at her, hearts racing with hope. Moments later, Cruel burst through the clouds in her real dragon form, swooping upward with an ecstatic Can and Sue clinging to her back. Can was practically screaming with joy because it was her first ever dragon ride, while down on the ground, Haji stared up, shouting that they better not let excitement get the best of them. Cruel, the great white dragon, blasts through the sky toward a huge forested mountain, where a cave gapes right into its face. Mid-flight, she mutters that everything would be fine if only Hagi would stop teasing her. But Can rides on her back, scowling, and rips into Cruel for flying recklessly, and the very same suit loudly backs her up. Not okay, not even close. Touching down right at the mouth of that massive cave, the crew spills out, Haiji peering into the black entrance, demanding if her treasure is truly down there. Now fully in her humanoid form and gripping a huge club-shaped torch, Cruel snaps back that yes, it's inside, then orders them to follow her. She whips them into the cavern, and with a snap of her fingers, the torch in her hand bursts to life, bathing the damp stone walls in flickering light and lighting the way for Haiji, Kanai, Sue, and the master craftsman. As they push deeper, Canning fidgets and asks Haji if he thinks traps might be lurking. Haji nods, yeah, it's possible, especially with a treasury in play. Cruel hears this and laughs it off, sneering at the idea and demanding why anyone would plant traps in their own home. Her casual dismissal throws him off balance, and he can't even spit out a real answer. So Kana leans in, asks what wild thoughts just ran through his head, then points out, at least for now, there aren't any mice around. Her words snap him into the moment. He whips his gaze around the cavern, and unease crawls higher and higher as he realizes there isn't a single living soul in sight, just empty stone. And when he confirms it, his stomach drops. The tales of Dragon's Hoard are real. Sensing his worry, Cruel flashes a cheerful grin and tells him not to stress. Her scent soaks the cave and keeps both animals and most people from coming near. And when Hagi catches that whiff, he clamps a hand over his nose, instantly realizing just how brutal her aura really is. Cruel halts mid-run and proudly declares, "We are here, welcome to my treasury." The cavern swings wide into a massive chamber packed with glittering gold, jewels, and priceless artifacts. Haiji snaps that if they so much as damage one thing, they'll be stuck paying it back for the rest of their lives. Can stares in stunned silence, while Sue's eyes light up as she blurts, "It's all so shiny." She stared at the mountains of gold and jewels and snarled, "How did you even pull this off?" Then confessed that the biggest share was handed to her by humans, though sometimes other kinds of beings would doze off in her sacred domain, and she tucked treasures onto them before they left, like a brutal little thank you. Hearing that, Kane blurted out, "Do gods even get offerings?" Cruel snapped her head aside, clearly thrown off by the idea, because to everyone else she was basically a walking god in armor. But when Cruel looked at Kane, she just saw a normal, cute girl, the kind she felt no special power from. He stared at the sheer size of the hoard, and it hit him. This world could treat a holy dragon like something close to a god, and the thought was brutal. A monstrous, cruel, colossal, draconic image burned into his mind, driving it home. As he was lost in thought, Kanai grabbed an ornate black mask from the treasure pile, and she asked if the design was an owl. Then he snapped, warning her not to touch things so careless. Out of nowhere, a shaky voice, no body attached, slithered through the cavern, and the armored hero froze, gasped, "I love you," spun around fast, and demanded to know who was behind that sound. Cruel immediately clocked Sue and knew she'd heard it too. Sue nodded hard, while Kin just froze, cheeks blazing as she clutched the mask, and then she blurted the words back, "I love you." Cruel pointed right at her and exploded that Kane was blushing, getting totally flustered, and that the voice came from her. Stunned and mortified, Kane stammered back, scrambling to deny it and insisting, "No, it wasn't me." But Sue snapped in to set the record straight. Turns out they were wrong. The voice didn't come from Kana at all. It came from the mask she was clutching in her hands. As her companions were still reeling from the shock of the cursed mask, Kane shot them a wink and went full investigator. "I'll take a quick look," she said, snapping her appraisal skill onto the dark artifact. The appraisal shocked him. It wasn't for what he expected at all, but for a bright, bird-like contraption labeled as a parent mask. It ranked as a D-magical tool, and its power was simple. It repeats the words you've memorized, just like a parent would. All these magical treasures piled up, and Haji couldn't help but snap. Where did they all come from? Cruel, gripping an armful of those identical parrot masks, just shrugged and confessed she had no idea. She only stashed every gift she ever got here, and the haul didn't stop. There was plenty more. He snatched one up and peppered Cruel with questions about it, while Sue kept her eyes locked on a tiny stone statue Cruel was holding instead. Ken even blurted that it was adorable, and Haji spun toward her, mask in hand, and demanded to know what kind of taste she had. His question made Kane snap back, straight up asking if her sense of style was really that weird, while Cruel cut in, saying the mask wasn't cute at all, and Kane's face showed pure, obvious disgust. Realization hit Haji mid-debate. He knew the voice from earlier had to come from the black mask Kane was holding, not those parrot masks. He shoved her to blurt out the password, but Cruel confusion surged in and he snapped, warning Kane not to fall for the parrot mask trick. His thoughts got wrecked the instant Sue popped up holding a tiny stone statue that looked like a little dog, and she swore she heard something coming from it. So Haji just stared, totally confused, and told her he didn't get it, even as she waved the thing at him without another word. She slammed the statue down. Boom. A brutal burst of light and force erupted. Haji shrieked for Sue to run as he dove straight for Shield Cruel, and the blast wave rocket thrust them both, blasting him and Kanai through the air. She jerks herself upright through the dust and shattered concrete, totally unshaken by the blast she just unleashed. Then Haji drops to his knees beside her, panicking, asking if she's okay. She waves off his fear like it's nothing and motions him straight to the crater's center, urging him to see what just surfaced. As soon as she gestures, his focus snaps to a brutal lion dog statue clawing its way out of swirling smoke. Then it fully hardens, and a terrifying presence squeezes into the room, glaring eyes blazing in the dark while a deep voice booms for a password. A stone guardian statue erupts into motion, wrapped in a storm of brutal energy as it roars to life, its eyes burning with malicious light, its jagged stone teeth bared in a terrifying snarl. With this brand new threat crashing down, Haji and his crew, Kane, Cruel, and Sue, circle up, ready to fight. Their faces scream shock, but their eyes lock on with grim determination as they size up the animated beast in front of them. Cold realization hits. She blurts out that she suddenly remembers the demon bee statue. It won't let anyone pass unless the right password is spoken, or it attacks. Kanai, all practicality, snaps, "Do you know what the password is?" While Haji glares at Cruel and demands the answer. She nervously grins and scratches her head, admitting she has zero memory of it, while behind her, Haji and Kani just slump in total exasperation. No password to calm it, so the statue whips forward and the whole group jerks back in panic. Haji clenches his teeth, knowing they've got nothing left but to fight. Then Kane steps up and declares she'll take the lead. She lunges her sword straight for the creature's face, and in a blink, the statue snaps it shut between its brutal jaws with a thunderous clank. A sharp crack rings out as the steel blade smashes against the statue's stone teeth. Kanna, hazy and wide-eyed, can't believe what she's seeing as the weapon shatters in her hands. With danger closing in, her cruel face hardens into pure resolve, and she decides that since it's come this far, she has to move. A blur of motion, she rockets onto the Guardian's head, clamps its jaws shut with her bare hands, and it just stops. Kan stares in disbelief, shocked she pulled it off. Then Cruel snaps into action with a fierce shout. She'll take the beast on herself. She strains against the animated statue, screaming at her friends to run, and with a hard, determined grimace, she snaps. She'll stall the thing while they get out of here. Grave worry tightens his chest as he realizes he can't just leave Cruel to face the Guardian alone, so he steels himself to figure out who the statue's master really is first. The struggle cuts off out of nowhere, *pop*, and the towering animated Guardian collapses back into its original shape, a tiny stone figurine that just drops to the ground, lifeless and harmless. Stares, shocked it's finally over, gasps. Cruel explains it was a razor-close call. She tells her that the words she yelled, "Leave it to me," were the password. Then it hits her. She's the one who built the stone guardian long ago. Sue darts in right away, blurting out an apology to Cruel, then flips the script, praising her hard work, gushing that she's amazing. Grinning at the praise, she whips around to Haiji, begging for his own compliment, and he beams back, thanking her while praising her hard work, until Kane cuts in, snapping that this whole mess was Cruel's fault for forgetting about a creation this dangerous in the first place. Then everyone's attention snaps to a giant, glittering mound nearby. Haiji squints and realizes it's Tamagang's Great Hall, and the crazy part, a stone statue got buried smack in the middle of the precious ore. Hannah flashes a relieved smile and says this finally means they can forge the kitchen knife, while Sue and Cruel, right beside her, erupt in cheers and toss their old troubles out of their minds. Zai and the others hung back while Haiji turned around with a sharp, thoughtful look, then told them that before they went back, he needed to finish one last thing. Kanai, Sue, and Cruel just stared in stunned, silent confusion. After his declaration, they ended up at a rustic forge, Hagi watching in silence, while Cruel raised a giant sledgehammer and started hammering glowing tamahagin in relentless, powerful rhythm. With one deafening clang, the hammer landed dead on target, and the heated metal erupted in a brilliant storm of sparks. He stared, stunned by her work, then smirked, slowly, urging him to forge it instead of casting it, given how much there was to work with, and Hagi snapped back that she finally got what he meant. She broke it down for them. Sure, casting would have been easier, but what they were trying to make demanded real power, the kind you only get by stacking the iron and forging it until it turns solid. Even though she understood the whole forging process, she stared in pure confusion as a ladle was loaded up with iron sand and charcoal. They heated the metal blazing hot to squeeze the iron's structure tight, then pounded it again and again, fold by fold, until it forged into a brutal composite built to laugh off impact. He finally spilled his plan, finished the item, then haul it straight into Kroll's private treasury, and the sudden target hit her like a truck, leaving her frozen, stuttering, and unable to believe it. She stands at the treasury's entrance. An enormous cavern blasted right into the face of a towering rock cliff. A towering, reinforced metal door blocks the path, like it's daring anyone to try. Haiji, Sue, and Kanny stare up at it, stunned by its massive size and the brutal strength it would take to break through. She can't believe AG is actually questioning a door that grand, but he shuts her down fast, insisting that it's there for a reason. To stop anyone with bad intentions from stumbling in by accident. He explains that the door exists to keep everyone safe from the dangerous stuff stuffed inside the treasury. Then Sue, grinning, rubs her head against Haiji and calls him kind, even as he swears it's way too soon for compliments. Now the whole crew stops in front of a wall packed with bizarre masks. That crazy mask, molded like the head of a giant insect, spits out a thick, palpable darkness. Hagi blurts that he's shocked by it too, then asks what they think. Sue trembles, calling it unbelievably scary and cruel, but she just fixes her gaze on the mask, reaching out with a hand as if she can't stop herself from asking what's wrong with it. As her fingers reach for it, the mask erupts in a surge of dark energy. She gasps in pain and yanks her hand back, staring at it in shock. Sue clings to the trembling Cruel for comfort as Hage reveals his brutal trap. He's rigged a mask to blast anyone away who touches it, and now they've got to pick a password for Cruel. Kan jumps in, saying they should choose something she can remember in a snap. Cruel straightens up, nerves still sizzling, and promises she'll never forget his words after what just happened. Then Sue shoots her hand up and Kan grins. She finally gets the whole plan. Standing with her crew, she watched the cruelty unfold. Then the crowd burst into bright grins and shouted the chosen password together. "Hey G, we love you." That declaration blindsided Haiji. He snapped around, eyes wide with confusion, and demanded why they'd picked his name as the password. Sue insisted, jaw set, that she'd never forget it, never. With a cruel little smile that somehow felt tender and knowing, she said that even after hundreds or thousands of years, the memory would still be there, guaranteed. Haiji just stood frozen, staring back with pure shock and disbelief crashing through his face. He whipped his head aside and raked a hand through his hair, absolutely fed up, and Kane, watching every twitch, leaned in with a teasing grin and asked why he'd turned away from them. Nearby, the stone guardian statue softly lit up, its stony face somehow screaming one clear truth. This wasn't a password at all. It was a confession of love. That awkward implication hung in the air, and Hagi snapped his gaze away, sweat beading on his temple. Cruel, blushed, and clearly flustered. Kanai covered her mouth to smother a grin and said the whole thing felt exactly like a confession.